Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Board of Health meeting. Just to let you know, we have a very, very busy agenda. So I'm going to be quite tight on your 5-minute speaking time. I am probably going to give you a warning or do a helicopter thing to ask you to wrap up. But don't forget, board members and visiting councillors, if we have any, we'll have a chance to ask you questions. So you will have extra time with that as well. All right. First of all, we will start with any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, that's great. I need a motion to confirm the minutes of April 27th. Councillor Cressy, thank you very much. All those in favour? Anyone opposed? Starting the meeting off well, thank you. We have quite a few speakers today. If you're wanting to know who's speaking, there are green papers over at the side, so you will know who's speaking on which item. There's some communications also. All councillors will have communications out at your tables. And now we will start going through the agenda. Item HL 4.1, hookah water pipe use in licensed establishments. We have a presentation on that, so we'll be holding that. Item 2, health impact on expanding gambling at Woodbine Racetrack. We have speakers, so we'll be holding that. HL 4.3, the food strategy 2015 update. We don't have speakers. Does anyone like to?
I'll move for information.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nunziata. Move. All those in favour? Excellent. Okay, moving right along. 4.4. Rapid health impact assessment on alternate solutions for Gardner Expressway, Lakeshore Boulevard, the east reconfiguration. 4.4, we have speakers, so we'll be holding that. 4.5, the Toronto Urban Health Fund allocations, we have speaker on that. 4.6, Toronto Public Health Accountability Agreement, we have a speaker on that. 4.7, Service Agreement Awards and executed by the Medical Officer of Health for 2015. Would anyone like to adopt these recommendations? Councillor Cressy, thank you. All those in favour? Excellent. 4.8, Day Nursery Immunisation Programme. This is an information item. We need a motion to receive this.
I'll move receipt.
Thank you to Councillor Nunziata. 4.9, Infrastructure and Service Improvement Plan for Emergency Shelter Systems. Any questions on this? If not, we need a motion to receive this. Anyone else? I'm going to take the gentleman's. I can't see your name down there. I'm sorry. Peter, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, Peter. We'll have Peter do this one. There we go. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Excellent. Thank you. 4.10, support for banning the use of microbeads. Any questions on this item?
We need a motion to support the position that the city banned.
So we need a motion to support that the city bans these microbeads, as we saw in the letter in our package. Need a motion to do that. Councillor Cressy, anyone can put their hands up, by the way. Councillor Cressy, we'll move that one. Perfect. All those in favour? Anyone opposed? Now, do we have any additions to the agenda, or is that?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I could, I'd like to ask that we reorder the agenda and that HL 4.4 be the first item, because I understand that there are some members that have to leave.
If that is the will of the committee, we do have speakers, though, on items 1 and 2, but if members of the committee would like to rearrange the agenda, I don't have a problem.
Sorry, she wants Gardner first?
Would like 4.4 first. Anyone objecting? All in favour? Excellent. So that will be 4.4 will be heard first, which is the Gardner Expressway, Lakeshore Boulevard East reconfiguration, and then we will go back immediately to the 4.1, if that's okay. Perfect.
Okay, we have to add this as new business.
We-
Councillor Kristen Wong.
We also have a new item to add to the agenda. You should all have a pink piece of paper. It's a letter from Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam. So let's add that as item number...
Just read the title of her.
Sorry, the title is Working Conditions in Nail Salons Across the City of Toronto, and that will be 4.11. Do you guys not have this one?
You don't have it.
It's coming out to you, so it is Working Conditions in Nail Salons Across the City of Toronto. If we put it as item 11, then you'll have a chance to read it before we actually get to it. Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, moving right along to item 4. We do not have a presentation on this. We do have speakers. And the first speaker up is Stephen Barnes, Director of Policy, Wellesley Institute. Mr. Barnes, is Mr. Barnes here? Maybe because he changed the agenda, he's not here. No, Mr. Barnes, going once. Stephen Barnes going 3 times. It's probably twice, actually, going 3 times. If he does come, we can add him to the end. If not, we have Teresa De Felici, Director, Government and Community Relations, CAA, South Central Ontario. Welcome. As you know, you do have 5 minutes. If you're sure, there's a clock over here you can look at, and I will, as I say, give you a gentle reminder near the time. All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa De Felice, and I'm the Director of Government Community Relations and Driver Education for CAA South Central Ontario Club. CAA South Central Ontario has over 2 million members and is Canada's largest club with over 6.2 million members nationally. Our policy work includes increasing transit, developing safe cycling policy, programs and infrastructure, and advocating for walking safety. CAA is here today representing our multimodal constituency and to address the categories and findings of the Medical Officer of Health's Rapid Health Impact Assessment. Expressways are designed to move people and goods efficiently. The Waterfront Toronto report on the Gardner has focused on just the expressway, but CAA feels that these reports are detrimentally ignoring the impact on the broader transportation network within the Eastern Gardner section catchment. With all due respect, by strictly relying on Waterfront Toronto's reports and in the short time frame that the medical officer was asked to conduct his rapid health assessment, we are concerned that the report's conclusions before you today and the request for this to form part of Council's consideration may not include all of the relevant information that has been presented with respect to the Gardner. These include the following areas of concern. The report is based on traffic impact delays of about 3 to 5 minutes that were part of the original Waterfront Toronto modeling. Since that time, the Gardner Coalition, a group of stakeholders, including CAA, commissioned the University of Toronto's Transportation Modeling Group to assess the proposals related to the future of the eastern section of the Gardner. The study concluded that the delays would be in the 10-minute range. Waterfront Toronto subsequently added a base case scenario to their modeling, which demonstrated new numbers similar in range to U of T's, up to 11 minutes for certain routes destinations studied in its original modeling. Waterfront Toronto modeling was based on transit plans that have not yet been finalized, approved, or funded. It is unclear whether the Medical Officer of Health's report assessed its impact on a built transit scenario or status quo. While the transit category in the assessment is supported by both options, the other categories are impacted by the rate of which future transit expansion occurs. Many categories of the assessment are affected by commute times. There have been a multitude of studies that have highlighted the impact of excessive commute times to quality of life and are similar whether the commute is by motor vehicle or transit. Many studies conclude an impact to happiness, general well-being, less opportunity for physical health activities and stress as being impacted by these growing commute times. With commute times in the GTA being around 60 minutes and the potential impact of a one-way 10-minute delay with the Eastern Gardner removal, commute times will increase and so will the negative effects. The economic perspective indicates that the hybrid is the preferred option, yet concludes that more jobs will be generated by the remove option. The U of T study offers that the additional traffic delays will result in an annual loss of $37 million. This is in addition to the $11 billion annually in lost productivity that CD Howe reports due to gridlock in the GTHA. The social impact of the loss on business and individuals and resulting increases in business operations ultimately passed on to consumers through goods and services cost increases and personal economic hardship to make ends meet does not appear to be reflected in all the relevant assessment categories. With respect to road safety, there are a number of considerations that we would suggest make the remove option weaker. This includes new research into behaviors and the public's willingness to engage in distracted driving. While motorists recognize the dangers of electronic device use, research indicates a greater degree of this activity, particularly when stopped at traffic control signals as well as in traffic delays. There's also growing concern among road safety professionals about increased electronic device use among pedestrians and cyclists and increases in fatal and personal injuries. The 8-lane boulevard remove option has the propensity to increase road safety incidents by design, with more traffic control signalized intersections, a greater mix of different road users within the same roadway, as well as other road users used as alternatives by motorists, such as highway-style traffic volumes and delays interacting with pedestrians and cyclists, mixed with increased distracted driving, cycling, and walking. The University of Toronto modeling presented an additional option based on possible objectives of the remove option. If the objective is to create a more pedestrian-oriented network and align with Waterfront Toronto's 60 kilometers an hour boulevard, pedestrian crossover delays are about 1.5 minutes to cross, and 1,600 vehicles become delayed into the transportation network either on the boulevard or other alternatives such as Richmond Street. As mentioned, the U of T study looked at the DVP Richmond Street exits, which was not incorporated into Waterfront Toronto's modeling. Richmond has been redesigned to include an improved cycling network for the city in the cycle track. Richmond Street assessments are unlikely to have included the impact of additional vehicles resulting from the Eastern Gardner remove option.
If you could
This
please wrap
puts
up.
vulnerable road users at risk. Natural Resources also has talked a lot about fuel efficiency and the impact of emissions due to increased speeds, idling, and therefore, and weather. The 10-minute delay does not include
And your last
inclement weather. So we would ask that all these factors that impact a number of the categories in the rapid health assessment, and considering the magnitude of some of these considerations and which stakeholders were involved in the development assessment,
I really
is
need you to back up.
unclear whether these considerations are, and incorporated in the timeframe given to develop and present to the board. We suggest the public health reach out to external stakeholders, including U of T professors who conducted modeling for the Gardner Coalition Group to review additional information for consideration.
Thank you very much. I know it's
My
a lot to-
apologies.
That's all right. Look, questions of councillors? Angela, yes, question.
Thank you, Teresa. I know CAA and the Gardner Coalition members were active during last month's Public Works Committee, and I was wondering if you could provide some comments about some potential compromises or options that arose from that debate.
I think the committee passed a number of options to look at, including things that would make it easier for more lanes of traffic on the lakeshore, or various elements to increase pedestrian safety. I think with the U of T study that we identified, there was a couple of options that were explored. The 60-kilometer option really is a pedestrian-friendly objective, and in that's where you saw significant delays, not only just to commute times, but into the number of vehicles trying to get into the core or exit out of the core, but in particular get into the core. They also looked at a 70-kilometer option, because what U of T basically said was, it's not clear what the objectives are. Is the objective to be pedestrian-friendly, or is the objective to have a traffic or traffic demand-oriented model? And in the 70-kilometer model, you had a 3 minutes and 4-second delay to pedestrian crossings, in which case they would have to stop and wait for another set of lights to cross, but less delay to the amount of traffic or vehicles trying to enter into the system. I think it was a bit of a trying to find a compromise, which, interesting enough, the hybrid was the compromise, a year ago. So.
I apologize. Councillor Crisanti is visiting with us today, and I should have asked him to ask his questions first. So, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation. And I know you had a lot of information cram-packed in 5 minutes there, so and some very good information. And I just missed a couple of things. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on a couple of points that I believe you made in your presentation with emissions and with the economy and the actual delays? Because clearly what happens, if you just consider what's going to happen logically, If, traffic all slows down and exits the Gardner into a boulevard, that it could be 60 kilometers or 70 kilometers, and I would suspect there's going to be a number of traffic signals along that route as well before you reconnect again to the Don Valley. So that's just going to inherently just slow traffic down as you're exiting, and then they'd have to pick up speed again and ramp back up. So there are going to be delays, regardless of, I don't think we need studies to figure that out, but nonetheless there are. And so can you just highlight your comments on those 3 points again?
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair, Natural Resources Canada highlights a number of things when it comes to fuel efficiency, as well as impact of emissions, and then, of course, fuel costs on individuals. Inconsistent speeds, increased idling, rapid acceleration, all impact emissions and fuel efficiency. Add that to additional delays due to bad weather, both in summer and winter. The predictions are more severe weather storms, not just impacting our winters, but also our summers, like we saw in July of a few years ago. These are all the things that become increasingly challenging when people are trying to manage their vehicles' optimum fuel efficiency and emissions output. And so, these are some of the things that when you create one objective, it could have a resultant effect on what you're trying to achieve on another thing that has a negative impact. And so the boulevard option, the number of, the design of a boulevard with traffic control signals, the start, stop, those types of things are things that we're suggesting need to be looked at a little bit more carefully. And the reports that have been done have indicated that the delays in the number of vehicles that will be impacted from entering into the transportation network, we're not just talking a slowdown. They had nowhere to go in terms of the modeling that was done by U of T. They would just be stopped there unless other measures could be put in place or other routes could be designed.
So then you would think the health impacts will be far greater if we're putting that many more emissions into the air as a result of the slowdown, as a result of the traffic ramping down and ramping back up again at some point.
I think it's something that needs to be looked at in closer detail. Even when we saw in the UK, when the London congestion charge was put in, there was a lot of success touted about the fact that emissions were reduced in the core where the congestion charge took effect. But what we also saw was that outside the congestion zone area, there was an increase in vehicle emissions.
Okay. And what was that estimate on the economy loss of?
So in a conservative estimate done by the University of Toronto, they pegged, in addition to the $11 billion that is often heard from the C.D. Howe Institute about lost productivity in the GTHA, traffic delays would result in an annual additional loss of $37 million. If you look at it over the certain time span that we're talking in terms of funding, you're looking at $550 million, the 10 to 15 year. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, we have Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. I appreciate it. So just a few questions. First of all, what does CAA stand for?
The Canadian Automobile Association.
Thank you. And the U of T study, did the CAA in some manner commission it?
There was a group of coalition stakeholders, and CAA was one of those coalition stakeholders, yes.
So the Automobile Association was one of those who commissioned the study you're referring to?
Correct.
Okay. So you noted that idling was bad for the environment. So are you therefore contending that maintaining a system of elevated expressways is the better environmental option?
Well, I think from a vehicle efficiency and movement, starting and stopping does increase emissions as well. I mean, we're not talking about the most trendiest of options here, but the reality is that vehicles moving at optimum speeds and moving at the speeds by which the roadways were designed to move them is better than a start and stop consistently. And with the traffic congestion delays that are already existing in the City of Toronto, there are some challenges.
So just to be clear, the contention of the Automobile Association is that a system of elevated expressways is more environmentally friendly than a boulevard option. Just to be clear.
I think that what we're saying is that the continuous link of expressway-style traffic has a less impact in having that traffic move through, less of an environmental impact, recognizing that we are not environmental experts.
Okay.
And so we
No,
just
just-
think that it requires further investigation based on natural resource.
No, I
Canada's-
just wanted to understand that the Automobile Association feels that elevated expressways are better for the environment. So is it the opinion of the Automobile Association then that a city that designs itself for public transit would be better for the environment?
Well, we know that public transit is something that we all desire. We're very much in support of the growth and development of transit in Toronto. It is one of the key solutions that we need, but it's not the only solution that we need in dealing with congestion,
But just
including
specifically-
environmental impacts.
So, but specific to the environment, you've maintained the CA's position that elevated expressways are better for the environment on account of reduced idling. Is the association's perspective then that investments in public transit are the best way to reduce emissions?
Our position on the expressways or elevated expressways is that our members have indicated a support for a continuous link, and we think it's important to keep traffic moving efficiently and vehicles moving efficiently, and that we think that that is better on the overall assessments that are contained in the report today, whether some of them being looking at the environmental impacts, the social impacts, quality of life, the economics, the commute times, all of those considerations.
So has the Automobile Association taken a position advocating for increased investments in public transit?
Absolutely. I actually sat on the Premier's panel on the transit investment strategy myself on behalf of our organization.
So is it the opinion of the Automobile Association that those investments are the best way in which we can reduce emissions?
There are a number of ways that emissions can be reduced. It's not a one fix for all. And transit is an important part of that. So is a viable road network that moves people and goods efficiently through the system and doesn't stop them where they don't need to be stopped or where they're not meant to be stopped.
Okay. And then the last thing, you noticed a critique of the rapid health assessment on the basis that it was using the Waterfront Toronto studies. Are you aware that the Board of Health has endorsed an active city designing for health framework, including 10 design principles that were used in designing this report?
I read that in the report, yes. I also think that the report, I believe, was commissioned on the 5th or 6th of May.
But the active city designing for health, which was passed and endorsed here in May of 2014, that was done in May of 2014 and prepared then.
Right, and they're
Okay,
talking
thank you,
about the
because
elements.
those 10 principles were what were used in designing this report. Thank you.
Any other questions of a deputant? If not, thank you very much for coming out today. Oh, yes. Yes, Francis.
Do we have a copy of your report?
I will get you a copy
You can-
of the U of T
the clerk a
report.
copy, yeah, your deputation.
Deputation, we'll get you a copy.
So all members of council could receive it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Our next deputant is Murtaza Haider. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. You have 5 minutes, and I will give you sort of a 5-second warning to wrap up, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Murtaza Haider. I'm a professor of transportation management at the Ted Rogers School of Management. I have a PhD in transportation engineering and planning from the University of Toronto. Formerly, I was a professor of transportation engineering and infrastructure planning at McGill University. I'm here to respond to the health impact assessment put forward by the Toronto Public Health. I'm making 4 assertions here. I believe that the remove option is likely to generate more greenhouse gas emissions and not fewer. I also believe that the remove option increases the odds of pedestrians and vehicle collisions. I also believe that the resulting increase in traffic congestion, which is 2 million annual hours of increased travel from remove option, a figure duly reported in the EA report and also in the subsequent presentations by the city, that increase of 120 million minutes annually will result in congested flow, will result in increased stress to drivers, which is a direct public health impact. And therefore, I believe that the various assumptions made in the EA report, as well as the health impact assessment report, should be considered and reconsidered. My understanding, based on the review of all the documents available from the City of Toronto, is that the reduced VKT, vehicle kilometers traveled, are the reason why people have asserted that there will be fewer greenhouse gas emissions. The issue with greenhouse gas emissions is that it's not a result necessarily of vehicle kilometers traveled, but fuel burned. I am referring not to the University of Toronto study, I'm referring strictly to the documents presented by Dillon Consulting and other consortium that were commissioned by the city or Harbourfront, available on your websites. They clearly indicate that the remove option will result in an additional 2 million annual vehicle hours traveled. What it means is that vehicles, even if they are assumed to be fewer vehicles and traveling for fewer distance, would be operating or running. And when the vehicles are running on fuel, they will continue to generate greenhouse and other gas emissions. Using first principles, I converted the additional 2 million vehicle hours of operation into carbon dioxide or CO2 emissions, which I believe are roughly 19,900 metric tons. These are just very crude results. And the reason for sharing those with you is to request the health authorities in the City of Toronto to take this into consideration and give us better results. Because of the available resources at the city, I believe these assertions could be tested, and if found false or true, could be checked. We have published, I have personally produced research using data from Statistics Canada that clearly show that commuters who are exposed to traffic congestions more than 3 times a week are reporting an excess level of stress. In fact, the highest level of stress is more frequently reported by those who face traffic congestions more than 3 times a week. Given that the city's own commissioned research shows that there will be additional 120 million minutes annually of congested flow resulting from the remove option over and above hybrid option, these congested flows will induce stress, and that is more of an eminent concern, or should be an immediate concern for public health than the climate change impacts, which are much longer term. And for this reason, I believe that the public health authorities in Toronto should consider and also review the very assumptions that led them to believe that additional congested flow will result in fewer greenhouse gas emissions, will not impact or increase or worsen stress, and given the fact that with the boulevard option, pedestrians will be likely to cross 8 lanes of traffic, not 3 and 3 now, and that the boulevard option will absorb all the traffic that is now on the access-controlled Gardner Freeway. The likelihood of collisions between pedestrians, bicyclists, and traffic, given the increased traffic flow on the remove option on the boulevard, the odds of accidents or collisions between pedestrians and automobiles is likely to increase, not decrease. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the deputant? Councillor Crisanti, do you have any questions? You okay? Thank you. Councillor Cressy.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to pick up on your last point there. I won't go to the emissions piece, as I've talked about that. You talked about what you see as the health risks of an 8-lane boulevard. Have you walked across University Avenue before?
Many times. I used to be a student at University of Toronto. I've done that.
And are you aware that University Avenue is 8 lanes?
Yes. At places, yes.
Would you make the contention that University Avenue is an unsafe boulevard?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. Why not?
Very good question. See, if University Avenue were to absorb or carry the same traffic that is expected to be carried on the boulevard option, that is to take the flow from a expressway and then you feed it from DVP onto a boulevard, the resulting increase in traffic flow, which is not the same as on University Avenue.
Let's follow that then. How many cars use the Gardner Expressway East during rush hour?
How many cars now? The results suggest that the total travel into the city, 3% of the cars use Gardner
And
East.
that, so it's 5,200 cars.
That is true.
Do you know how many cars use University Avenue during rush hour?
Please tell me.
Over 4,000. So we're talking about a difference of about 1,000,
Yes.
not a significant difference.
No, if you were to assume that those 5,200 will be the only vehicles carried by the boulevard and the one on Lakeshore Boulevard that exists today, you have to add those two together, and then you get the
but
number.
We would do the same with University. You made the contention that University is safe, whereas the Gardner Expressway East would not be, but they have a similar.
I did not
load
make any of those assertions. I
My
simply said-
apologies. I
let
thought
me-
you said University Avenue was safe.
No, that's your statement. I simply asserted that given the resulting increase in traffic flow on Lakeshore Boulevard from the levels that exist today,
Yeah.
the resulting increase in the flow from remove option will increase the odds of collisions between pedestrians and automobiles. It's quite different from saying which is safe or not.
So, but just to be clear, we both recognize that University Avenue is also 8 lanes and has a similar amount of traffic flow as the Gardner Expressway East.
With a huge difference that there are no pedestrians on Gardner East.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
And hence, the odds increase when you put the pedestrians and drivers in the same shared space.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. Next, we have Councillor Burnside for questions.
Hi. Just for clarification, how many tons of greenhouse gas did you mention?
I've roughly estimated to be 19,000 metric tons,
19,000 metric tons.
using the United States Environmental Protection Agency's factors.
That's fine. I'm not questioning the credibility.
And
I just
the
didn't get
request
that.
here is to have those numbers checked,
Okay,
not to say that these are the right numbers.
Okay, thank you. And the total number of cars on University Avenue, as per Councillor Cressy's question, was how many?
He mentioned it's 4,000.
Total number? And on University was 4,000 an hour?
See, I can...
Hold on, sorry, I just want to, I'll lose my thought. I'm very slow, dim-witted here. I wish it were that were the case. So 4,000 total on University Avenue. Now, Councillor Cressy talked about eastbound on Gardner.
Yes.
So what would the total on the Gardner be?
In a morning peak period, about 12,000 vehicles. In
I
both
think,
directions.
if I'm not mistaken, Councillor Cressy was only talking about one direction on the
Yes.
Gardner.
So he was mentioning the inbound traffic on Gardner East heading west, it's 5,200 vehicles. And that's merely a reflection of 3 lanes carrying 1,700 to 1,800 vehicles per lane.
So would you agree we're comparing apples to oranges?
I would strictly believe so, that the traffic flows are very different. And the Lakeshore Boulevard that will result, as per the EA report that the city has commissioned, shows not 5,200, but many more vehicles at a higher speed than the one expected.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. So my last question, getting under the wire here, is are you aware of the speed limit on University Avenue?
My guess is about 50 kilometers an hour.
50 kilometers per hour, that's correct. Are you aware that approximately 5 to 10 years ago, that speed limit was 60 kilometers per hour?
If you say so, yes.
Would you have any idea why they may have reduced that?
The collisions between pedestrians and automobiles taking place at lower speeds are much less harmful for pedestrians. At 60 kilometers an hour, collision between a vehicle and a pedestrian will be extremely fatal.
Right, so you would
security
agree that there
concerns
were
would be the
safety
reason.
concerns on University Avenue probably prompted the change in the speed limit?
I would be surprised if there was any other reason.
Okay,
And
thank
For this
you.
reason, I think that
We're
the
good.
speed on Lakeshore Boulevard, which would be 60 to 70 kilometer as a remove option, would be a safety concern for pedestrians.
So then, once again, you'd probably agree with me that the comparison is not entirely fair.
I agree with you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Deputant? If not, thank you very much for coming today, sir. Appreciate your time.
I have a copy of it. I will leave it with the staff.
That'd be great. If you could give that to clerks, that'd be fantastic. All right. We now are going back to our first deputant, Steve Barnes. I hear you are here. Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you.
As you know, you have 5 minutes, so
Thank
thanks
you very much. So thanks for having me here today. My name is Steve Barnes. I'm the Director of Policy at the Wellesley Institute, which is a Toronto-based research and policy institute. And our mandate is to drive change on the social determinants of health to improve health and health equity in Toronto. So, as we all know, there's been a lot of debate about our options for the Gardiner Expressway, and the debate has largely focused on commute times, urban development, economic impacts, and environmental concerns, and these are all important things to consider. But up until today, health and health equity have largely been absent from the discussion. So first and foremost, I'd like to endorse the recommendations that are in the report in front of you today from the Medical Officer of Health. The recommendations, I believe, are based on sound evidence and offer important insights into how the decision about the Gardiner may impact health in Toronto. So the health impact assessments that Toronto Public Health conducts cover a wide range of factors, including environmental, social, and economic and lifestyle factors, plus access to services and health equity. So we believe that including health equity in the second stage of the environmental assessment on the Gardiner is absolutely essential. And let me tell you why. So not all Torontonians have equal access to good health. So for example, poor air quality and urban heat have larger impacts for homeless people, frail, elderly, and isolated people, and people with low income, all of whom are at greater risk of heat-related illnesses and death than other Torontonians. There are also inequities in the populations that are most likely to have low income and consequently poorer health. For example, racialized Torontonians, sole parents, and people with disabilities are more likely to have low income. People with low income are also less likely to live in neighborhoods that have good access to green spaces that can contribute to good health. So this speaks to the importance of public spaces that are accessible to vulnerable populations. Now, the first stage of the environmental assessment included 2 health indicators, air quality and noise. And for these indicators, the removal of the Gardiner with construction of the boulevard was the preferred option. However, the environmental assessment did not address how each option could affect specific populations, including differential health impacts. For example, while the remove option was rated more highly for air quality, there was no consideration given to how changes in air quality might affect the health of vulnerable populations like the frail, elderly, and people who are homeless. And we believe that that's an important omission. One of the great benefits of health impact assessments and health equity impact assessments is that they do more than just identify potential negative health impacts. They also provide us with an opportunity to identify and enhance decisions that could contribute to good health. We have an opportunity at the moment to create an urban environment that makes us healthier, and we can make a decision that would reduce urban heat, create more green space, open up land for affordable housing development, and more. So once again, I endorse the recommendations from the Medical Officer of Health, and we would be more than happy to offer our expertise in health impact assessment in the next stage of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 3.5 minutes. That was brilliant. Questions? Anyone have questions for the deputant? Councillor Nunziata.
Have you ever, over the years, made any deputations to City Council or any of the Board of Health or any of the committees on your issues on health impact of the Gardiner?
We've never...
Have you ever, like, the Gardiner's been there for years. Have you ever come forward and asked 20 years ago, 10 years ago?
Well, we haven't...
This was an issue or just suddenly became an issue?
So we haven't deputed specifically on the Gardiner, but we have deputed on issues of the built environment.
So why would you not have deputed on the Gardiner?
Well, the reason I'm here today
Gardiner's
is...
been there for years.
Of course, and this is the opportunity that we have to do something about it. So we tend to focus on policy decisions that are in the public realm right now. So we are weighing in on the opportunity we have to enhance health through the current process.
But it's always been a health issue, right?
The Gardiner, as it is, I mean, of course, there's health impacts associated with all of our infrastructure.
So the health impact has been there for years.
Yes, and now
Thank
we have
you.
an opportunity to change that.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just have one.
Sure.
You mentioned about green space. You're the first person to talk about public space and green space. Can you just say what you feel about where the green space and health fit in together with this, the options we got before us with the Gardner?
Yeah, so there's extensive evidence both in Toronto and internationally about the health benefits associated with green spaces. And many of those health benefits are connected to mental health, but there's also links to physical health and well-being as well. And so I made specific reference to improving access to green spaces for vulnerable populations. And this is something that I think makes sense in a whole range of urban environments. I think the reason it's so important for us right now is that the stretch of the Gardner that we're talking about right now is not green, and it's not terribly accessible to anybody, let alone vulnerable populations. So I think we have an opportunity to actually think through, and perhaps there's ways that we can enhance either of those options to create the most green spaces possible. And of course, one final thing, green spaces also tend to facilitate things like active transportation, which can also, in turn, facilitate better health.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming out today. So is there anyone else here who would like to speak? Even if you haven't put your name down, you do have a right to come up, state your name, and you have 5 minutes to speak. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? No? Okay, thank you very much. We now take it in for questions to staff. Anyone have questions to staff? Sorry, who's I? Sorry, I didn't see you back there. Okay, I'm with you. All right, excellent. So you have questions to staff? Councillor Holiday?
I did, thank you.
All right, we'll take you far away, and then we'll see who else wants to have questions.
I did look at the report, and I was surprised at some of the findings on it. A couple of things that struck me, in particular about green space, and I really do agree that green space does improve our quality of life, but I was looking at the basic stats between the two options, and the remove option, it says here, has 4.6 acres more of developed space, and that's up in the sort of the north quadrant. And it has 7.4 acres more of developed space closer to Cherry Street. I guess that means more buildings. And the findings in the statement of the report is that there seems to be more green space in the remove option, but I'm looking at these basic stats trying to rationalize the two. If there's more buildings in the remove option, how is it that we've got more green space?
I'll just ask my staff to respond to that. I think the denominator may be different, but...
By looking at the environmental assessment that was done through the consultants hired by Waterfront Toronto and the City of Toronto, we were relying on their information. But essentially, by removing the expressway, it allows a lot more light to come in. So even things like the Lakeshore, the reconfigured Lakeshore Boulevard, would have 4 times as much opportunity for tree canopy as if you had expressway conditions still. So that's an example. The other thing is along the Keating Channel edge, the north edge. Again, that's a large opportunity not to have road space, but to have a pedestrian realm, sidewalks, and also increased park space. So we're taking it on the basis of what we read on the environmental assessment.
Well, the Keating Channel edge is actually quite important to discuss, because in the hybrid option, I believe that is envisioned as an expressway park. So it's green space below an expressway, but in the remove option, it's actually built up as buildings. So are we sort of into a quantity or a quality discussion here in terms of the green space? And I didn't realize that trees were kind of the deciding factor. Like I see one's got more trees, but not the other.
Again, we relied our health lens and our health impact assessment on the kind of information we received in the environmental assessment, so we took that at face value.
Fair enough. Did anyone actually compare the square meters of open space or public realm between the two of them? I haven't found that number yet, but if you've got it, I'd appreciate it. All I see is the sort of, the acres type discussion.
And we were seeing more park space, more acreage of park space, but I don't have the specific numbers.
Okay. Can we switch over to cars now? I was looking at the numbers with respect to the numbers of cars that move through the eastern corridor. So right now, we've got a Lakeshore Boulevard that moves 18,000 cars a day, and then there's about 100,000 plus that go through the overhead system. And again, another surprising result, that if we're going to flatten that and move 128,000 cars through a grade level conduit, why is that necessarily more safe for pedestrians versus only the 18,000 that they're having to cross today?
Again, in the environmental assessment prepared by the consultants, they make notation of current hazards with crossing the lakeshore in the current configuration, so that would be improved. Better sight lines by not having the pillars involved. And they indicated a number of safety features that would result with the reconfigured Lakeshore Boulevard.
Do we have any information in the city, though, when it comes to looking at car volumes? I know when I look at traffic warrants in community council, when we talk about stop signs and pedestrian crossings and PXOs, a major discussion point in that is the volume of cars. And right now, we're talking about 18,000 versus 128,000 cars. It seems to me a material difference. Do you have some thoughts on it besides what the consultant said?
Certainly, the issue of volume of cars is important. It's the speed with which the traffic moves is very important as well. It's the visibility conditions for the pedestrian and being able to cross. And I think the other really key feature is if one has a reconfigured Lakeshore Expressway, 4 lanes going each direction, one would very much need to have a central median, which would be a refuge point for pedestrian crossing at that point. That would really have to be an essential safety feature.
Rather than just going under the traffic and avoiding it altogether. Okay. The last is I was surprised as well that we zoomed in on 50 seconds or 54 seconds as the delay time. These reports talk about 3 to 5 minutes, and I wondered if you had some comments on the health impacts from a broader perspective. The 200,000 cars going out towards the west end that are delayed, and the several 100,000 cars in the east end that are delayed, the broader impact about what that does to people psychologically when they sit in traffic for several minutes, or is that a negligible amount, like the 54 seconds?
So that, Councillor, was your last question, but we will allow for the answer, obviously.
What we find from the literature from other examples where cities have taken down expressways, I think New York City is a good example, is it actually improved the pedestrian realm. It allowed for mode shift to happen. There were less people driving in cars and proportionally more people finding alternate ways of moving about. So what we would be looking at in terms of health impact assessment is what does it do in terms of revitalization and improvement of the quality of that piece of revitalized part of the city.
Thank you very much. Next person for questions is Councillor Nunziata.
To Dr. McEwen. The request for this report did not come from the Board of Health, and normally the Board of Health would direct you to come forward with a report. But you instead responded to just a letter from the chair. So why would you agree to put this report on the agenda by a request from the chair, not from the Board of Health?
In view of the timelines, there wasn't an opportunity for the board to confirm that decision, and I acted on the basis of direction from the chair on behalf of the board.
Okay. Well, the Gardner has been on the agenda for a number of months now. So you had opportunities previously to bring forward a report or request the board to ask for the report.
I had not planned to make a report until I was asked.
Okay. By the chair, not by the board.
That's correct.
Okay, so my question is, so we've been discussing the future of the Gardner Expressway for years now, for years, in the past 20 years. And when Mayor David Miller was mayor, that was also a discussion on the agenda. So why have you just come forward now with this rush report? And why did you not bring an assessment forward months ago, given the impact and the decision-making that this council in June was going to make? It just didn't come up on the agenda just recently. It's been years that we've been discussing the Gardner. So why was it such a rush now, and it wasn't important earlier?
The immediate reason is because I did receive a request from the chair of the board. I wouldn't say it's accurate that we have not been reporting on the issues involved. There have been a series of reports on the impact of the built environment generally, not specific to any one roadway or built environment feature. But we've done a series of reports, some of which we've done in conjunction with planning and the transportation services, to lay out the health lens on decisions like this.
So when the item was on the agenda, when David Miller was mayor, that was on the agenda. Did you bring forward a report, or did the Board of Health bring forward a report at that time?
No, they did not, and I did not.
Yeah, so there was never a report.
There were a series of reports that were not specific to this decision, but which I think very much laid out the relationship between choices and decisions made about the form of the city, its transportation system, its built form, and health outcomes. And I think we've reported quite a lot on that, actually. And you'll see this report is actually based on one of the earlier reports on active design.
So this report's basically cut and paste report.
No, I don't think that's accurate. It's a rapid health impact assessment. Within the time available, we have done our best to assess the impact on population health of the features of the options which are before City Council. As has been said by my staff, we were basing our health assessment on a series of assumptions that were put forward through the environmental assessment. And much of the discussion that I've heard from the deputants today has been about those assumptions rather than about the health impacts that we looked at based on them.
So how long does it take how long did it take for this health impact assessment to be completed? And then how long does it usually take for a proper impact assessment?
Well, health impact assessments are done at different levels of detail. This is a high-level, rapid risk assessment, which means it looks at a high level. It doesn't delve into quantifying. For example, this report will not tell you how many additional illnesses or deaths would result from the different choices. We didn't have either the time or, frankly, the underlying data to be able to do that level of detailed assessment.
So did you consult at all with the Deputy City Manager for Cluster B, who authored the report to the Works Committee and Infrastructure? Or did you consult with anybody? Transportation?
We had the benefit of all of the published information that has come out on this issue, and that was what we based the health impact assessment on.
So you didn't consult with the Deputy City Manager?
I don't think we consulted specifically with the Deputy City Manager, but as I say, we have all of the published information.
So why wouldn't you have consulted with the Transportation?
If I might, through the chair.
They're the expertise, right?
Certainly, there have been working groups over the last few years, and there have been opportunities for public health staff to be involved in this issue, and we have been part of that and have commented on these transportation issues. I must say, initially, one of the issues that was of concern to public health was, for example, demolition and dust control of tearing down the Gardiner. So we are routinely involved in these kinds of issues.
So the request from the chair came forward, the memo, May 6th. So you were able to get all that information since May 6th?
Yes. What you have before you was all work done since that request came forward.
But you didn't consult with any of the stakeholders?
Well, we weren't directed to do a consultation. We were directed to do a health impact assessment. A consultation would be a different kind of process. We weren't looking for the views and opinions of different stakeholders. We were looking for what is the health impact as far as we could determine based on the information which is available in the public domain about the two options before council.
But why would you not have been interested in the different views of the various stakeholders?
That's your last question, if we have an answer.
I think what we've seen is that there are different assessments of not the health impact, but of the impact on transportation, environment, and so forth, that we've heard from some of the deputants today that have been put forward by some of the interested parties in the discussion about this important policy decision. We based our health impact assessment on the EA that was led by the city. I think it's the most appropriate foundation for a health impact assessment among the choices that we had.
Thank you very much. Next person for questions is Councillor Carmichael Greb.
Thank you very much. My first question, why is it in one report that we have before us today, you say that traffic and congestion does affect health. And in this report, it doesn't. I mean, in the Woodbine report, you say that traffic and congestion volume increase will affect health, but volume increase and traffic congestion will not affect health in this case.
I don't think that's what the report that we're discussing now says. It compares two options, both of which have an impact on traffic and congestion volumes. And based on the environmental assessment, we've drawn a conclusion about the health impacts of the two scenarios.
Right, but you say that the difference is not expected to have an impact on health in the remove.
Okay.
Increasing volume, time to travel, congestion.
Yeah, the time to travel in the environmental assessment was very small, and it wasn't possible for us to say that there was a meaningful difference in the health impact of that small difference.
Can you explain why a stable and well-paying job is important to someone's health?
Yes, as we've reported before, a stable and well-paying job, apart from its psychological benefits, provides income. And this board has received a number of reports outlining the relationship between income and health outcomes, which is very clear in Toronto.
So the health impact assessment says that the remove option may make the downtown less attractive for employers and employees due to concerns about increased travel time. So if our existing businesses choose to relocate and jobs are lost, then this would have a negative impact on health?
So yes, there are two employment-related, if you like, assessments in this health impact assessment. One talks about local employment in the lands that are directly affected by the reconstruction of the roadway. That indicates an increase in employment, which would have health benefits. The broader impact on employment based on a perception of travel times is something that we felt we had to put in the other category. You'll see that was, I believe, the only one of the criteria that we looked at from a health point of view that gave the edge to the hybrid option. And on my view, it was outweighed by the findings for all of the others.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Next, we have Councillor Burnside. Your questions.
Thank you. I'm not sure that I heard an answer or understood the answer to how you arrived at the 52-second increase in travel time.
I believe that comes directly from the environmental assessment, but we can confirm that.
Exactly, it comes directly from the environmental assessment report. It's one reason we put it in quotations in our report.
Okay.
It's the average during peak morning rush hour, and it's the additional time. It's on top of what's clearly a long commute already.
Absolutely. You talked about load shift and people using different modes of transportation in New York City. And in that regard, I think you were referring to when they took down highways in New York City. Would you agree that you're comparing totally different transit systems?
What I would agree is that when you look at various case studies done in cities, let's say in North America, I think Portland, Oregon had an expressway as well. I believe it was San Francisco or Los Angeles, and New York City, there were others. Generally, what you find is when you tear down the expressway, it really does stimulate mode shift as long as you can provide for some of these other shifts, whether it's extended cycling infrastructure or increased public transit. So what it does is it allows capacity for growth and creates space for other motorists, and in that way is beneficial.
Would you agree that public transit provided in Toronto is not the same as New York? And if you want to look at cycling, if you want to compare cycling opportunities in Toronto, they're quite a bit different given our winter climate versus Oregon or San Francisco.
I would agree that they are very different.
Okay, thank you. Now, was there a health, before the Board of Health was asked to look at this, part of the AA did not include a health impact. It wasn't specifically studied, is that correct?
No, that's correct. I mean, it was studied implicitly because looking at environmental impacts is very closely related to health impacts, but it was not a specific health impact assessment, no.
And you mentioned that there wasn't enough data in what you were looking at in terms of the environmental assessment to give your own detailed assessment of what the actual impact would be in terms of numbers. Is that correct?
Well, data and time, probably. I mean, a very detailed quantitative risk assessment, which is actually rarely done because you have to have really good data, would actually try and measure the difference in health between the two options. All we've done at this is indicate which option is going in the healthy direction. And
So it's very general. It's not really giving us a lot of information to go on.
I think knowing what direction it's going to push health is pretty good information for making a decision. I think City Council should be thinking about the health implications of major decisions like this. Certainly, if we were uncertain, if there wasn't enough data to say which option was going to be healthier, then we left them in a tie, and you'll see that there's several of the criteria that we looked at in which we haven't indicated which one was healthier. But where there is a clear indication that one is healthier than the other, again, based on the environmental assessment, we've indicated that.
But are you weighing, there were 4 key components in the environmental assessment. Were you weighting them all equally?
We've treated them individually.
But were they weighted equally when you were?
There wasn't a weighting system. I guess if they had come out, 5 for hybrid and 5 for remove, then we would have had to be concerned about weighting, because then it would make a difference which 5. But it didn't come out that way. It came out many more in favor of remove than hybrid in this level of assessment.
But I think one could reasonably argue if one criterion, that being the economic impact, if the effects of removing the Gardner or the hybrid or whatever the case might be were quite substantial in that area, so not just on balance, which is the whole thing what you're talking about, if it was quite substantial, like let's say 90 to 10, versus another measure that you're one of the other 3 criterion where it's just 55-45, I would argue that you really need data for each of the 4, and that to be able to, because it's not just a 51-49. That could be in the transportation, that could be in whatever case, but on the economic side, it could be quite substantial, and that would weight it quite a bit differently.
If we had had evidence that there was a very uneven impact, then you're right, 1 or 2 factors could have outweighed a number of others. At this level of assessment that we did, I didn't see any indication that one of the factors was overwhelmingly important for health compared to the others.
But I think that comes back to my original question of you saying that there wasn't enough detailed data. Those were your words.
I'm not sure that it would have made a difference, but I'll concede that a detailed assessment would have enabled us to be more accurate about the contribution of each of the factors, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now we have Councillor Cressy for questions.
Thank you. Dr. McKeon, the report starts off by stating the way cities are built shapes the lives and health of people who live in them. Could you expand on what you mean by that statement?
That's something which is supported by a lot of research. The way in which people move around the city, for example, affects not only their physical activity level and all of the chronic disease risks which are associated with a high or a low physical activity level, but also their chances of being injured as they move around the city. The nature of the communities that people live in help determine their patterns of activity. If you've got, your school and your business and your workplace and your groceries all within walking distance, you're much more likely to walk. Obviously, shape of cities helps determine community safety. Some communities are less safe by virtue of having closed off or inaccessible or less visible corners in them. So all of those features have been studied in many different ways in many different cities around the world. And we've summarized these relationships in a variety of earlier reports under the rubric of Healthy Toronto by Design, which essentially indicates that cities have some choices about how they organize and build themselves when it comes to impacting the health of the people who live there.
And so that principle of the built form and how we plan as a determinant of our health, so that premise was used in the design of the Active City Designing for Health report, which we endorsed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And as I say, those principles are increasingly accepted. The report that you referred to was a joint report from myself, the chief planner, and the general manager of transportation services.
And that report, which has 10 principles to guide it, was that used in the rapid health assessment?
Yes, it's the reference point for all of this. I mean, it was based on the environmental assessment, but the way in which we approached applying the health lens was very much based on those principles, and those principles in turn are based on a lot of research evidence.
So we have policy on the books that we can use to conduct a rapid health assessment when and as required.
Well, yes, and in fact, the conduct of the health assessment is also based on a health impact assessment framework, which we've used in a number of other situations.
Okay, so it's not abnormal for us to do this. In fact, we're not doing it on the fly. We've done it before, and we have policy to guide it.
Yes, that's true. We don't usually do it as quickly as this, but yes.
Now, in the consideration of this health impact assessment, you considered 11 factors. How many of those 11, how many did you state a preference for the removal option?
Well, of them, I haven't got the count, but only one was in favor of the hybrid option. There were a couple in which there was a tie. We weren't able to distinguish which of the two options was better for health, and the remainder, the healthier option appeared to be the remove option.
And my math is not nearly as good as Councillor Burnside, as I will admit, but if I understood that correctly, of the 11 factors that were used in the determination of the health assessment, the remove option was found to be the preference for 8 of them, the hybrid for only 1 of them, and in 2 cases it was a tie.
That's correct.
So on the basis of the 11 health factors that were used in doing this assessment, the clear preference was for the remove.
Hence the recommendation.
Can I follow up, because some of the deputants spoke to this, on the social and health impacts? It states here that the remove option is better for health due to smaller climate change impacts. We heard from some deputants the argument that elevated expressways lead to less idling, therefore it's better for the environment. Could you comment on that?
Well, I think, again, this is based on estimates of greenhouse gas emissions that come from the environmental assessment, which looked at all aspects of greenhouse gas emissions. And actually, since one of the issues that was raised by a deputy in her question was about the timing of greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gases are a long-term thing, although many people believe that we are seeing impacts on climate now. However, we do have very good information about the impact of air pollutants on health. We've been studying this for over a decade. We recently reported to the Board of Health on progress in that area. Last year in 2014, I believe. So that, to me, that's a very clear link. And if we have information that indicates that an option is going to lead to more releases of air pollution, then we have a very clear link to health outcomes.
Okay, so there is a clear link between increased carbon emissions from cars and air quality.
Yes.
One final question. Are you aware of a Board of Health agency anywhere in North America that has endorsed elevated expressways as good for public health?
We haven't done that search, but it would surprise me if that happened today, given the ample evidence that exists to supporting healthy built urban form and health outcomes. There are many boards of health and many health agencies that have been speaking out on these issues, and it's become quite a central concern in public health.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. Any other? Yes, Angela, questions?
Thank you. I read in the Toronto Star that the Ontario Interim Chief Medical Officer said that emissions are worse when a vehicle is idling, making stop-and-go traffic more harmful to your lungs. Could you elaborate on the health implications for drivers who would breathe in the vast amount of pollutants due to the idling?
Well, idling is, in fact, not good for people's health. In fact, this Board of Health, an earlier version of it, was responsible for initiating one of the first idling control bylaws in Canada, in Toronto. So idling is definitely not good for your health. I would say there's a complex relationship between idling and the form of the roadway, though. I've certainly idled on the Gardiner Expressway. So I think what the environmental assessment looked at was overall impacts on patterns of traffic flow. And again, it was that on which we based the health assessment.
Because I didn't find anything about idling in the report. So is that not something that we should include before bringing it to council, if that were to happen today?
I think it's included in the overall impacts. We didn't look down at the level of how vehicles were moving. We took the information that came from the environmental assessment on impacts on traffic, which includes idling or not idling, and used that to do the health assessment.
But if tearing down the Gardiner were to slow down traffic and people were left idling, then that would be bad for drivers' health, correct?
To the extent that it happened, but you'd have to look at the overall impact on air emissions. And idling is one component of that.
Okay, anyone else have questions before we go to speakers? All right, speakers. Any visiting councillors? Councillor Holliday, you're already up, but
I know you can't see me
you
from
can do
there.
this once. Thank you. No, you're hiding behind Councillor Cressy. That's why I couldn't see you earlier.
He's
But
blocking me.
now he's now stepped to the side.
No, I'll be brief. But in reading this report, it reminded me, and I say this in an endearing way, of school. When we would gather in a circle and we'd play what I call the telephone game, where you'd tell a story at the beginning of the circle. And one kid would lean over to the next person and say the story, and the next person would lean over and say the story, and you'd kind of reprocess the story and come back at the end and listen to it again as a class, and you'd realize that it had morphed because everyone looked at the story and sort of synthesized and processed the facts and came out with the next statement of the facts and passed it on. What I would just want to say in my statement is this is kind of like that. From what I heard from Councillor Hernandez's questions is that the Board of Health looked at the reports that were put out there. And there's quite a bit of good work out there, thousands of pages, right? And they processed them and they summarized them just as they were asked to do. And they created a scorecard here, and there's a number of criterion. But they were simply a tally of facts that have been delivered in other reports, and they reached a conclusion. What I would just sort of ask and say and recommend that my colleagues on council do is absolutely read this report, but also don't take this as a substitute for what the mass volume of information has to tell us. It's true, and what Councillor Burnside said is that perhaps there isn't a weighting on all of the facts, and it doesn't necessarily make it an easy decision. Case in point, we talk about economics, we talk about global and regional competitiveness, and it says that the hybrid will likely be the safer bet when it comes to sort of broader jobs in the region because it allows traffic to flow and encourages businesses to stay. But it's opposed to what happens at local employment. You know, the remove option definitely produces some really good local retail jobs because there's some mixed use. But is that an apples to apples comparison? I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure that a small gain of jobs in one area outweighs perhaps a larger loss or the loss of a major manufacturer in the area or industrial job because the traffic situation has changed and they can't utilize the highway system. So yes, take this report, read it, but don't forget the vast volume of information that is also out there that is quite important that we take into account. And we look into depth, more into the data, more into the broader discussion, and not just the single bullet points that are too tempting to arrive at a quick judgment on something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Okay, next to speak, we have Councillor Cressy. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep doing this to you. Sorry, Councillor Crisanti. You weren't waving your hand at me. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wasn't making a whole lot of noise. Well, I want to thank our medical officer of health for the report, and I think it's important that we do look at this from a health lens. And there's no doubt, but you know, there's been a long list of opinions out there, many opinions, and I think if we stand back and consider the opinion of highest authority, and if I wasn't speaking, I would ask you the question: do you know what the opinion of highest authority is? I call that, as some other do, maybe using the term that's been used already, but that's called the opinion of common sense. So I'll give you a sampling of how that works. So you end the Don Valley Parkway at the lakeshore. You end the Gardiner at the lakeshore. What happens? Apply this theory. So you've got the movement of goods and people. You have vans, you have trucks, you have 18-wheelers, you have buses, you have tractor-trailers. I haven't even factored in the vehicles yet. So now you factor those in. look, what happens? Try and picture that. You know, never mind the theories and everything else. Let's look at the reality of what really is going to happen. Absolutely, it's a great idea to try and beautify, and you can still beautify a whole lot by doing that, by focusing in on the hybrid option. That is really a balanced approach. It allows for development. It allows for the movement of goods. It allows for the movement of people. It keeps the loop intact. It does so much good for the economy, which in the long run will offset the additional cost, probably tenfold. So good things cost money. So look at that. So the idea, and this isn't where that decision is made, but if you're looking at it from a health lens, it only makes sense that there'll be far more issues related to health if all this traffic funnels into a residential community. And whether it's 8 lanes or 10 lanes, I don't think that matters. You're going to have traffic signals to deal with. You're going to have other obstacles, pedestrians, and you're going to have cyclists and other things that are going to need to be, addressed too. And so traffic is just simply going to slow down, stop and go. And if you want to look at studies, there is a study from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency that says that emission rates are higher during stop and go congested traffic conditions than free flow conditions operating at the same average speed. And there's another comment that was made, I believe it could have been from one of our speakers, that said the remove option will result in 2 million vehicles hours of travel congested flow conditions. Now, if you don't, believe that maybe it's 2 million vehicle hours, maybe it's 1.5 million, maybe it's more, 2.5 million, 3 million, more or less. The point is there's going to be many more hours of congested flow conditions on the lake shore. I don't think there's any denying that, and I can't imagine anyone attempting to make an argument that, there is. So I think this committee needs to be careful in terms of how it handles this, and certainly how, when it's debated on council, I encourage my colleagues on council to really stand back and look at a very balanced approach to this issue. And that would only mean, I believe, the hybrid option will make the most sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor, for that. Next to speak, bringing it in, we have is the visiting councillor? No? He's just visiting. Okay. Councillor Cressy, and anyone else wanting to speak, so I can get your name on the lists. Okay, well, we'll start with Councillor Cressy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody. In our new term as the board, this has been one of the more spirited discussions, and it's an important one. We have a duty as a Board of Health to make and give our voice on key decisions from the point of view of health. That's what we're talking about here, is the health impacts. As the report states, the way cities are built shape the health of the people who live in them. And in the report, the medical officer of health is crystal clear. They evaluated 11 factors that have all been tested in previous policy that we've put forward and endorsed as the Board of Health. And they used, in looking at those 11 factors, they judged that the remove option was better for 8 of them, that for 2 of them, the remove and the hybrid were the same, and only for 1 was the hybrid better. It's health. And so we have a decision in front of us at Council in a week and a half's time, which is a 100-year decision on the future of the Gardiner Expressway East. And in making that decision, we will consider a range of issues, from planning to transportation to the economy. But unless we, as the Board of Health, bring our voice to the table, at Council we will not be able to make that decision with the critical discussion of health. So that's what we're discussing here today. And on that issue, this decision should be crystal clear from an environmental point of view and air quality. I want to put a couple numbers out there. Since 1975, the number of people commuting into downtown Toronto using public transit, the GO and the TTC, has increased every year since 1975. And the number of people who drive into downtown Toronto has stayed the same. 68% of commutes into downtown Toronto use public transit. And the reason is clear. Our roads are already at capacity. They're already at capacity. So the only way for us to not just alleviate congestion, but to build a city that actually takes into account emissions and air quality is through public transit. That's why the remove option is the clear option. On the issue of congestion and its impact on quality of life, when you make decisions on the basis of congestion, you need to look at tomorrow's needs, tomorrow's population, not today's. So over the next 25 years, the city of Toronto, or the region, the Greater Horseshoe region, will add 6 million people. So in the next 25 years, we're going to add 6 million people into this region. We cannot widen the roads or build new roads to accommodate that growth. To solve congestion and in turn improve the quality of life by widening roads is like loosening your belt to solve obesity. It doesn't work. The only way we can deal with air quality or the quality of life that's been raised, the only way is by making the investment in public transit. Supporting a car-oriented city for a region that's growing like ours is just a losing proposition. On planning objectives, I think a critical piece we haven't talked about here is the remove option allows us to unlock the waterfront. That is phenomenal for our city. What is better for a healthy, active city and healthy, active living than getting people using our waterfront? That's a positive health benefit. And of course, when it comes to pedestrian movement and road safety, the report is crystal clear. And that's because anyone making the case that elevated expressways are somehow good for people's health, well, that one's new to me. As the medical officer of health stated, there is not a board of health agency in North America that he's aware of who has endorsed elevated expressways as good for health. That's what we're talking about here. And so we have, as I say, a critical decision. And I think as a board of health, we have to decide, are we supporting a vision for the future, a vision of healthy, active living, good air quality, smart built form and planning principles for the future, or are we seeking to maintain a city of the past? The last time we built an elevated expressway in Toronto was 1965. I was not even close to being born at that point in time. But we haven't built an elevated expressway since 1965. Cities around the world, from Seoul to Madrid, from New York to San Francisco, and more than 30 others, have removed their elevated expressways. And in every case, they have found noticeable health improvements. And so, to me, at the end of the day, this comes down to, as a board of health, what is the best decision from the point of view of health? And on that basis, it's a simple one. You put people first. If you're designing a city for how do people live in the city, as opposed to how do people leave the city, then the remove option is the clear option. Bill Davis, the former progressive conservative premier, when we talked about the Spadina Expressway, said this. He said, if you wanted to design a city for roads, the Spadina Expressway is a great place to start. But if you want to design a city for people, the Spadina Expressway is a great place to stop. From a health point of view, the remove option is the only place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right on, 5 minutes. We've trained you well, even though you're so young. Yeah, we won't bring age into this one, okay? Next speaker is Councillor Carmichael Greb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing that we need to remember in this city is that to keep people healthy in this city, to be able to continue to build this city, we need to be economically viable. And if we slow goods movement, if we stop economic growth in this city, if we do things so that employers look at this city and say, I'm not going to go there because you can't get around, we not only harm our economic growth and future growth, we also harm the health of our citizens. Yes, Seoul, New York, Madrid have all removed elevated expressways. They also have hundreds more kilometers of subway lines than we have. It's not a comparison. The only way that we can get to where those cities are is if we remain economically viable and continue with allowing goods to get around the city, allowing people to be able to commute around the city without slowing traffic down, without causing more congestion, and making this city harder to get around.
Thank you very much. I think that's a record speech. Thank you. Excellent. She beat it. Next, we have Paul, who'd like to speak. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I guess this is the first time I've been speaking, so I might throw in a question for clarification. I'm looking at the recommendations that the medical officer made, and there was 2. What are the other options that we have? Or am I not allowed to ask anything?
You can ask hypothetically, but I'm afraid we are beyond questions. But you can throw it into a speech as to
Throw it
the
into a
question as
speech.
well.
Sarah may answer it in her speech.
Brilliant.
How about that? Yeah.
I'm trying to get a better sense of what we can do instead of recommending this. I know this was a rapid health assessment, and I'm worried that I'm looking at the 11 different factors, and I'm concerned that some of them, I think, kind of gloss over some aspects. I kind of agree with a couple of the comments that were made by the gentleman behind me and some of the other councillors over here that, yes, great, if we had this future where we all had public transport, that'd be great, but I don't think we're there where we're able to make that kind of decision today. I think we're looking at just a hybrid or not, and using that hybrid option. If we're getting rid of something, we're not replacing it with something better, we're replacing it with something worse. I'm looking at it from a number of points of view, from some people who do putative on greenhouse gas, the commute times, stress, the job considerations. I'm kind of concerned about other factors that may or may not have been considered in this. So the reason I was asking my question up front was, I'm concerned that yes, we should always look at things from a health point of view, but if we're pushing down, looking at comparing the economic benefits and all that, maybe the Board of Health isn't the right people to be doing that. So I would say to the second recommendation, sure, I would always want them to take a health lens to this, but I wouldn't want to push the Board of Health's opinion on a much broader topic to make a decision on. That's it.
For your first speech, that was great. Thank you, Paul. All right, any other speakers before Councillor Nunziata?
Well, being that this report was rushed on the agenda by the request of the chair, and report was cut and paste with other reports, I really have a problem when these reports are rushed on an agenda because it's been requested, because there's an item coming up at council. The Gardner has been on the agenda for years, and if there is a concern with public health, there was a concern 20 years ago. Why not be proactive and bring forward reports if you felt that the Gardner had such a huge health impact? It shouldn't be because we're rushing and there's an item on the agenda. It should have always been a health issue. And when a report is rushed onto the agenda and all the information, we don't have accurate information, and we're just bringing different reports and bringing these reports forward tailored to what your preferred option is, it concerns me. Absolutely. If you tear down the Gardner and you have all these thousands of cars driving through, tractor trailers, that it's not a health issue. Of course it is. You've got congestion, you've got idling. It has to be a health issue. The reason for the Gardner, the reason the Gardner was built, is to get traffic from the west to the east, east to the west, so they don't have to go through the streets. When they had the Gardner closed for the past year and a half, there was one lane on the Gardner from the west, coming from the west to the east, closed. And it took forever to get downtown. And most of this traffic was going down Dundas, Queen Street, all these thousands of cars all congested down the streets because one lane of traffic was closed on the Gardner. As soon as they opened it up, less traffic on Queen, Dundas, and they all went on the Gardner. 5 minutes to get downtown. That's the reason for an expressway. Commute time, to get people from A to B to work, to get through the city. I think there are a lot of opportunities for parkland, public space in the hybrid option. We did that at Gardner and Spadina when they built all those high-rise, and you've got this big, huge park space. Why would Toronto Council support all these high-rise condominiums to be built right next to the Gardner? You're driving on the Gardner, you can practically touch the building, it's so close to the Gardner. Why were these condominiums built? Why didn't the Board of Health come forward at that time and say they felt there was a health impact for these homes, for these condos to be built so close to the Gardner? The only reason that this report is here, because it's a rush report, we're dealing with the Gardner at council next week. I don't believe that it was given complete consideration on this report. It was just a cut and paste report, and I cannot support the report. The medical officer of health, we have other reports on this agenda, and I believe has brought forward because he felt there was a health impact to some of these issues that we have on the agenda today. Plenty of time to prepare these reports and bring forward accurate data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other speakers before I speak? All right, let me put my own timer on. There we go. Oh, are you sure? Just waving, you sure? Okay, sounds good. I have an amendment actually, or to add to what's before us today. The motion is that the Board of Health requests the City Planner and Executive Director, City Planning, to report directly to City Council on land use planning implementation for both options of the Gardner Expressway from a perspective of the official plan, best practice in similar cities that are pursuing active and healthy city objectives and active city designing for healthy principles. This is asking that, as you hear, city planning gets involved with how the land around the Gardner or a boulevard can be used. And as Councillor Francis Nunziata has just mentioned, we have a lot of high-rises built really, really close to the Gardner right now. Now, that's not in the jurisdiction of the Board of Health, that's in the jurisdiction of planning. So I would like planning to look at both options and come back to council and say what options we have and how we can use the land. The land doesn't only have to be used for high-rises, it can be used for open space, for parks. And that's also where this report comes in. The report before us today is only looking at the environmental assessment. They have not gone out, staff have not gone out and gathered their own information and worked out what else they'd like to do. They have just studied a report, and they were asked to bring back looking at that report with a health lens. That is what we have before us today. If we had had more time, I agree, we probably might have got more information. But this is not a cut and paste report. Before me, since I've been on this board, we have had many reports on the health of transportation, on vehicles going this way, vehicles going that way. We just had a report recently on wards 5 and 6 and looking at where the biggest impact is. And the biggest impact was at the intersections of the highways. So highways do have an impact on all of our health. I understand that completely. So before us today is a part of the piece of the puzzle. Councillor Holliday said this very well. This is a report on the health lens. One of our recommendations now is asking them to use a health lens in the next phase. We should have used a health lens in this one, we didn't, and this is what is now before us. So this is part of the puzzle. We'll be hearing from all the other departments. I'm sure we're hearing from transportation. I know we're hearing from planning. We have to hear from everyone for the councillors to be able to make a decision. No councillor I know is going to make a decision on whether we go hybrid or removal just on this one report. But I think as a board, we should be forwarding this so other councillors have a chance to read it. They will read other reports from other departments, and then you make your decision on good information in front of you. Not just one report, not just one person saying something. So this is part of the equation. We should be supporting this. We should be making sure and encouraging all city councillors to read this report before council, as it is part of the equation. That is going to be mine. Did I have to move recommendations as well, which I failed to do? I apologize. I was getting so excited with my other motion. So I am also putting in front of us today the recommendations. The Medical Officer of Health recommends that. We have item 1 and item 2, and then I was going to be adding mine that, as I say, this goes to City Planning to report as well, which I think is that other part of the equation. So I am stopping to speak then. I'm done. And now we'll go back to, I'm going to do a vote, first of all, on my amendment, which I believe is up behind us. So all those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Casanti, no. Oh, actually, yeah, you can keep your thumb up. Okay. So everyone must vote. So should we do this one again? So if you can raise your hand sort of fairly high. Everyone in favor of this motion to send this to planning? Everyone opposed against this motion? I'm sorry, I'm not voting. Do you know what you're voting on, Councillor? So the motion carries. Thank you. Okay. And then adopted as amended. All those in favor? Raise your hands nice and high so we can count you. All those opposed? So that does not carry. All right, that does not go to council. Thank you very much. All right, moving right along, we're going now back to item 1, which we have a presentation for, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to make a brief presentation on this item because I believe most members of the board were not part of the board when this item first came forward last year before us, and because it is recommending a regulatory change, which is important. Right, so the decision that the board made in response to recommendations last year were that we would consult with community stakeholders on measures, including prohibition, to address the health risks of water pipe or hookah smoking in Toronto, commercial establishments and connected patios. And that report that was before the board at that time outlined the science as then known about the health impacts, both first-hand and second-hand, of hookah smoking. We were also asked to report on international best practices in approaches to hookah regulation, and along with an economic impact analysis on business. So what's in the report that's before you today is an update on the health evidence that was before the board last year, the results of our consultation that we carried out with a number of different stakeholders, and a recommendation for a policy approach to address the health issue. So just as a reminder, hookahs are devices used to smoke either tobacco product or a non-tobacco product called shisha. Sometimes the shisha has tobacco in it, sometimes it doesn't. It goes by a number of different names. We've adopted the name hookah just for this report, just so we can be consistent. The substance is heated and burned through charcoal. It's often a collective activity, whether it's young people or cultural groups. People often do this together. And of course, there is a long history of traditional use in some communities, particularly in the Middle East. One of the concerns that we outlined in the last report was a growing use by young people who don't have any cultural tradition in this area, and to which a significant portion of hookah businesses are now catering. So the main concerns from a health point of view are that there are health risks associated with inhaling the smoke that comes from a hookah, whether it contains tobacco or not. And the health risks are really for users, people who are smoking, as well as those who are exposed on a secondhand basis, people who happen to be in premises where hookah is being used, and particularly those who work there who have higher levels of exposure. As far as we know, and we don't have an exact count because these businesses are not licensed specifically for using hookah, about 60 Toronto businesses that we know of offer hookah smoking on their premises, either as a primary activity or in conjunction with other products and services. And there are more in Toronto than essentially anywhere else in Ontario. So most of the Ontario hookah use occurs in the Toronto area. One of the concerns that we outlined is that hookah use in public places is a way of normalizing smoking. This is something we've been concerned about with other forms of smoking, whether it's cigarettes or cigars, that seeing this as an activity in normal places helps to legitimize the activity, particularly in the eyes of young people who are making a decision about whether to take up smoking or not. And indeed, surveys have shown that about 10% of Ontario students have tried a hookah in a recent survey, and nearly 40% are under the mistaken impression that it's actually healthier than smoking cigarettes. This is something that we've run into not only in surveys, but in our own work with young people. This is a prevalent misapprehension about the safety of hookah smoking. There was a study, a very helpful local study that was carried out in 2013, which we also mentioned in our last report, by the Ontario Tobacco Research Unit, in which they went into a number of hookah cafes in Toronto and measured what was in the air, what were people breathing who were not actually smoking. And they found high levels of carbon monoxide and small particles, PM2.5, the kind of fine air pollutants which penetrate deeply into the lungs and are associated with a number of respiratory and cardiovascular illnesses. And the levels of those pollutants they found were at levels which normally would be considered harmful to health, according to air quality standards. Outdoor hookah cafes also showed harmful levels, not as high as those indoors. And interestingly, they also measured nicotine in the air, which would be a marker for there actually being tobacco being used in the hookah. And even in premises which said they did not offer tobacco-based hookah, there was still nicotine in air levels. So, and this goes along with something that we found in our enforcement efforts, because of course, currently smoking tobacco is illegal already under provincial law, but it's very difficult to tell sometimes what's in the pipe because the product is often not labeled very clearly, and this suggests that perhaps the proprietors and the customers also don't really know what it is they're smoking. So we carried out a consultation, a fairly wide-ranging consultation that included talking to people who went to hookah offering businesses, to hookah establishment owners, to business improvement area representatives in areas where there were a number of different hookah businesses. We talked to the businesses who were their neighbors. We talked to cultural organizations that reflected the main cultural groups in Toronto for whom hookah smoking has been a common practice for a long time. We also talked to representatives from health groups like community health centers and universities and colleges, because we had seen in the past few years hookah being used as an orientation activity, for example, on university campuses. And we were concerned about how the universities were viewing this new way of smoking. We also took a look at both Canadian and American jurisdictions that have been grappling with this issue and discovered that for the most part, those that have taken action have opted for a regulatory approach, a prohibition approach. And I've listed on this slide a number of the jurisdictions in Canada and the United States which have effectively made the use of hookahs illegal. Sometimes they do it by adapting their current tobacco control legislation. Sometimes there are specific statutes that are put in place. The Board of Health has asked the province to act on this issue in the past, but the government really has not taken it on in a big way. In the recently passed legislation just from last week, there is some additional powers for local enforcement officers with boards of health to be able to seize and analyze the products which are being used, but there's no action yet really on protecting people from the first and second-hand impacts of hookah smoking. And that's perhaps because most of the problem is here in Toronto. It's not as much a province-wide issue. So the recommendation that's before you is actually a regulatory approach to prohibit the use of hookah in establishments licensed by the city. Why we chose that option is because it is the most clearly health protective option. It's also the option which will add to our existing efforts to limit social exposure to smoking and exposure to secondhand smoke. There is a need, I believe, to reduce the visibility and acceptability of smoking in all forms in public places, so this adds to that effort. This is also the option which was most often chosen by other municipalities, provincial and state governments, when trying to address the health issue arising from hookah. It's important, however, that a legislation of this kind be paired with good education, because we clearly saw in our consultation that many people are not aware of or don't appreciate that this is a health risk. And so very important to pair that education with a legislative approach. So in conjunction with our colleagues in City's legal services, we're recommending that the licensing bylaw be the vehicle for regulating this activity, and that hookah use be prohibited at all Toronto establishments that are licensed or required to be licensed. So any establishment or business which serves food or offers entertainment would fall within this category, and we believe that it would cover the vast majority of businesses which currently offer hookah in the City of Toronto. The process for making this change, we're asking the board to support this legislative change and make its support known to City Council. Because this would require an amendment to the licensing bylaw, which is in the charge of the Municipal Licensing and Standards Committee of Council, the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards will be reporting to that committee later this month on June 25th, making the recommendation for the specific change to the licensing bylaw. The board's wishes in this regard would be made known to the licensing committee as well as to City Council. And I think it's very important that the board weigh in on this, because we are really addressing a health issue through a licensing approach. We're recommending that the changes come into force later this year on October 1st. The enforcement would actually be done by Toronto Public Health staff, because we are already the main tobacco enforcement organization in the city for all both local and provincial legislation having to do with tobacco and other smoking. The approach that we would use is the approach that we've used when we brought in other new regulations of this type, which is to have progressive enforcement paired with education. Ultimately, we would get to the point of having predominantly a complaint response. We're not going to go out and proactively inspect for years to come all of these places to make sure that they're not using hookah. Once the bylaw is in place, our experience has been that compliance becomes very high once people are aware of it. We will be, along with municipal licensing, communicating the bylaw requirements on a blitz fashion to all the current premises, and of course through the annual renewal process for licenses, as well as information for new licensees. We want to pair this regulatory approach with an education strategy to address what we've seen to be a fairly low awareness of health risks. The activities would include advertising, particularly targeted at youth, since that's a group that we really want to be aware of this. So the activities really are looking at outlets which will reach youth, as well as people who are currently on the restaurant and bar scene. We, of course, will use our own website and social media, and the Youth Health Action Network will assist us in this way. Ultimately, this would be integrated into our tobacco control activities as other new regulations and educational approaches have been. That's the end of my presentation, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to take any questions when the time comes.
Thank you very much. What I think we will do, if it's okay with everyone, is we will have the deputations. We will then ask questions of the deputants if you have a question, and then we'll come back to asking questions of staff. So our first deputant today is Michael Purley. Is Michael here? Excellent. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. And as you know, you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Members of the Board of Health. I'm here on behalf of the partners of the Ontario Campaign for Action on Tobacco, the Canadian Cancer Society's Ontario Division, the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Ontario, the Ontario Medical Association, and the Non-Smokers' Rights Association. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the excellent staff report before you. Evidence of the physical and societal dangers of the use of both tobacco-based and non-tobacco-based water pipe smoking has been accumulating for several years. The report clearly demonstrates that that evidence has now reached a point where urgent action is required. Any type of shisha combustion, whether herbal or non-herbal, creates serious health risks for users and for those exposed to secondhand emissions. Despite some claims that only herbal product is offered in many Toronto establishments, research has identified airborne nicotine in some of these establishments, as Dr. McEwen mentioned. Hookah use is linked to subsequent cigarette smoking in adolescence. Many young people believe hookah smoking is less harmful than cigarette smoking, which is simply wrong. Visible hookah use strengthens the apparent normalcy and acceptability of smoking. And finally, use of flavored shisha is widespread. Taken together, these conclusions should be more than enough for the city to initiate immediate action. Some, however, may suggest, and have suggested, that the Ontario government should be legislating in this area, and recent developments make this unlikely. And as was mentioned, as you're no doubt aware, Bill 45, the Making Healthier Choices Act, which enacts various amendments to the Smoke-Free Ontario Act, received royal assent in the provincial legislature last Thursday. As the report before you states, one section of Bill 45 will allow enforcement personnel to take samples of material being smoked in hookahs in order to test for the presence of tobacco. This approach, however, while better than what we have had, is only a modest first step in preventing the broad range of impacts from all types of shisha on individuals in dozens of Toronto establishments. At the committee hearings on Bill 45, we raised the need to prohibit the smoking of all forms of shisha province-wide. An amendment was proposed by the NDP MPP France Gélinas to include this prohibition in Bill 45. Unfortunately, Ms. Gélinas's amendment was ruled out of order because the Smoke-Free Ontario Act, which Bill 45 amends, can only regulate, quote, tobacco, unquote, and, quote, tobacco products, unquote. Testing for the presence of tobacco is as far as the provincial government can go under the present legislation. Bill 45 also bans flavoring agents, such as fruit and candy flavors, in all tobacco products, whether combustible or smokeless. While this section of Bill 45 will prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco-based shisha in retail stores, such as specialty tobacconists, and I want to emphasize that, the same testing procedure I described earlier will have to be applied to any shisha being smoked in bars, cafes, nightclubs, or restaurants in order to determine whether the shisha, if flavored, contains tobacco. The bill's flavorings ban will therefore be of limited usefulness in addressing the multiple impacts of hookah shisha smoking in Toronto. The Ontario campaign endorses the approach recommended by Toronto Public Health, and we look forward to appearing at licensing and standards later this month to ensure that the existing epidemic of disease and death caused by tobacco products is not worsened by the continued smoking of shisha in Toronto establishments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of a deputant? I see none. Thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate it. Okay, next up we have Burani, and I'm not going to pronounce your last name, but I'd love you to tell me how you pronounce it. Come on up. You can all come up at the same time if you'd like. Are there more than one? All right. So this is what I'm just confirming. So you are the next three speakers, correct? Okay, so you each have 5 minutes. If you can identify yourself, introduce yourself when you speak, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Hi, members of the Board of Health. I'm Bhuvani. This is Akila and Sonia, and we're all members of the Youth Health Action Network, YAN. So YAN is an established group of youth from across the city of Toronto, and we are passionate about taking action against health issues affecting young Torontonians through both advocacy and education, namely in the area of tobacco control. So today we're here to talk about hookah use amongst the youth in our city. We have seen hookah use increase in popularity over the past few years, but what is especially alarming to me is that youth as young as in grade 7 have admitted to using hookah. So that means my 13-year-old cousin and her peers are potentially inhaling and being exposed to harmful chemicals and toxins like carbon monoxide and tar. While hookah use may be experimental for youth, it's not unusual for this practice to become habitual. This is due to the fact that hookah comes in a wide variety of flavors, designs, and colors, which make the practice appear both trendy and fashionable. Hookah is also seen as a way to socialize with your peers, is easily accessible, and is relatively inexpensive. In fact, going out to a hookah lounge with your friends lacht about just as long as a movie, yet it's only half the price.
As Bhuvani has pointed out, there's many negatives to smoking hookah that many youth are not aware of, and this really concerns us as youth because we see so many of these hookah lounges opening up around Toronto that are promoting their services to young people. Our concern made us curious to know what youth actually thought about this substance, so we took to the streets and made the following Street Buzz video to interview them on their thoughts on hookah.
I don't think there's harm. It's like a relaxation thing, kind of like weed. Yeah. It's fun. Okay. I don't know any negatives.
It's not really smoking, so it's just to feel like that you're smoking, but you're not actually smoking anything that bad for you or whatever. So it's like an alternative or something.
A water pipe supposedly is more healthy because you don't have all those chemicals used to sustain a cigarette made in a factory, but it's still bad for you.
It's a lot more common than smoking cigarettes. I mean, I know a lot of my friends go and do shisha, it's very common. And I don't know, I hear that it's not as harmful.
You have a choice of putting tobacco in it or not, and some people don't, so it's an easy way of saying you smoke but you don't use tobacco, so it's not, you make yourself think that it's not as harmful.
Some people tell me, there's some health issues with it or whatever, but I don't know, I think it seems fine to me.
There's no tobacco in it usually, it's just, and there's lots of flavors and things like that.
I don't think secondhand smoke is as big an issue because it is just 5% tobacco and it just isn't as thick. I don't know, that's based on my experience.
I didn't even know that you can get secondhand smoke from, I guess if you're doing it on a consistent basis, like if you're doing it every day, maybe around children, I guess that same effects as cigarettes. I didn't even think of that.
So as you can see, many students thought that there wasn't much of a risk to smoking hookah and that it was actually a healthier alternative to smoking a regular cigarette. But we're misled to think that the term herbal means that it's healthier, but this is obviously not the case. This is quite scary because I have friends who are very health conscious people. They try to eat and exercise in a very healthy manner, yet they still smoke hookah. This is alarming because they don't realize that smoking this is actually an unhealthy habit that could have some serious negative consequences to their health. So Yan wanted to make a difference, so we created materials like informative postcards and videos and took part in initiatives such as outreach events to spread the word that hookah is actually more harmful than many youth may think. These were some of the activities that Yan members have done, and Akila will point out some recommendations that the Board of Health should take.
We recommend setting a budget towards advertising, specifically towards social media, in order to circulate the misconceptions or the unknowns about hookah smoking, especially to the targeted population. We believe that social media is a great marketing strategy to reach out to youth. Personally, being on the internet, I am constantly bombarded with ads that are not useful to my daily life. Seeing an ad that can help better my life or help me make better, healthy decisions would make these ads more useful to me. Secondly, putting an age restriction on purchasing herbal shisha, making it mandatory to have warning labels on all packaging, including its contents, health risks, etc., and making it legible for all to read. Ultimately, also, we recommend a request for support to to businesses, who generate most of their revenue through the supply of hookah, to help them explore their other alternative business options. Ultimately, we support the recommendations made in the report to ban hookah smoking in public indoor spaces. Our reason for supporting this ban is not only to protect from secondhand smoke for those who may not have the choice to be in these types of environments, but also to reinforce efforts made to denormalize smoking in public spaces. This makes smoking less visible to impressionable children and youth who may be influenced to start smoking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies. Any questions? No? I just have one. Oh, sorry, yes. Yes, Stacy, please.
Thank you for your presentation. That was very good. Just a question around the age range of the youth you interviewed in your video.
So the youth that we interviewed was near Yonge and Dundas Square. So we believe them to be university students and just other youth. We're not sure the exact age range.
Okay, and a follow-up question would be, what is your stance on doing perhaps public education outreach at the junior high school or high school level so that there is some way of addressing misconceptions?
Personally, I think that's a great idea to start young, so students are just aware of what they're doing and just aware of any of the health risks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Just one, did you put this card together?
Yes.
I think everyone around the board has it here. I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for participating. I know we asked you to help us out last time, and you really have, so we really appreciate that. And that was a pretty scary movie, actually. If kids don't know what they're smoking, I think, you're doing a great job for educating them, so I thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have Lorraine Fry. Is Lorraine here? Excellent. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thank you very much.
You have 5 minutes.
Here or there?
Wherever you'd like. As long as the light is on, you're good.
On. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, councillors, members of the Board of Health. My name is Lorraine Fry. I'm the Executive Director of the Smoking and Health Action Foundation and the Non-Smokers' Rights Association. We're a national nonprofit health organization that conducts evidence-based research on topical issues in tobacco control and a national tobacco control advocacy organization. We were here a year ago presenting as well, mostly on the scientific evidence side. This time I'm going to concentrate a little bit more on another side. We've been monitoring this issue since 2008, working on it with respect to resources. We've had a national meeting on the issue, an Ontario-specific meeting. Water pipe smoking has a history that dates back 4 centuries. However, the past 2 decades have seen it grow from a dwindling activity practiced predominantly by older Middle Eastern men to become a youth-focused global epidemic. Epidemiological data from various jurisdictions confirm this. Water pipe smoking has become the most popular form of tobacco use among youth in all 17 countries of the Middle East, and in other parts of the world, it's second to only cigarettes. Global surveillance of water pipe smoking rates, youth and adults, indicates that young people of all cultural backgrounds are at the forefront of this epidemic. The social nature of hookah smoking appears to have found a niche in young people's needs for connectivity and social inclusion. As more becomes known about the dangers of water pipe, also known as hookah smoking, both tobacco as well as other herbal concoctions, jurisdictions worldwide are responding with prohibitions in public places and workplaces. In Canada, concerns regarding insensitivity to long-standing cultural practices have been voiced in public discussions about the possible explicit inclusions of water pipe in any new smoke-free bylaws. Vancouver's smoke-free bylaw was legally challenged under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms with claims of violations of freedom of conscience and religion, among other things. However, given the toxicity of all secondhand smoke, protection of cultural practices is not a valid argument against public health protection. In October 2014, the Second International Conference on Water Pipe Smoking Research was held in Qatar, attended by delegates from many of the countries where hookah smoking is considered traditional. The conference's Doha Declaration includes a statement that existing policies weakly address water pipe smoking. If they're to be effective in confronting the water pipe epidemic, policies must be adapted to account for the specificities of water pipe smoking and must be evaluated scientifically and regularly for their effectiveness. The most recent conference of the parties to the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control received a report by the Convention Secretariat on the control and prevention of water pipe smoking. A decision was agreed upon for parties to step up surveillance efforts and to strengthen their implementation of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control in relation to water pipe tobacco products through the integration of water pipe prevention and control and tobacco control measures. So internationally, there's a lot happening here in terms of all of the August evidence-based bodies such as the WHO. All the countries where water pipe smoking is considered traditional are parties to the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Many of those countries have taken measures to prohibit or restrict water pipe smoking in public places, including the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, just to name some of them. In Canada, the loudest opponents to smoke-free water pipe legislation are business people who have a financial stake in the issue, not religious or cultural organizations. A similar observation has been made in Lebanon. Alberta's Tobacco and Smoking Reduction Act prohibits the smoking of tobacco and tobacco-like products in public places and workplaces. A coalition of restaurant owners actively opposed the bill. However, opposition from the province's Middle Eastern/Islamic religious and cultural organizations was noticeably absent. Smoke-free laws that explicitly include water pipe and the smoking of other weeds or substances are enacted for the health benefit of everyone, regardless of cultural or religious background. The creation of smoke-free spaces is a globally recognized health promotion best practice. Laws that also prevent the smoking of other weeds or substances level the playing field for all businesses, as did the prevention of smoking cigarettes and other tobacco products. Although hookah smoking is considered traditional in various parts of the world, public health authorities and researchers agree that it is now a full-fledged global pandemic with young people at the fore. Given the known dangers of smoking and exposure to secondhand smoke, arguments in favor of the protection of historical cultural practices or the protection of business interests must take a back seat to the more important goal of public health protection. Based on the research, evidence, and consultations with stakeholders across Ontario, we have concluded that there is sufficient evidence regarding the health effects of water pipe smoking to justify a bylaw that prohibits water pipe smoking in public and workplaces. Culture is not static. Canada used to have a huge smoking culture. Yeah, I'll wrap it up. And had one of the highest rates of cigarette smoking in the Western world. This has been turned around through decades of education and legislation to the point where we now have one of the lowest smoking rates in the world. In conclusion, we support the Board of Health recommendations to prohibit water pipe use in establishments licensed by the City of Toronto. Our specific recommendations are, 1, that the City of Toronto pass a bylaw prohibiting the smoking of tobacco or other weeds and substances in public places and workplaces, including outside on all bar and restaurant patios, to protect health and to maintain a level playing field for all hospitality businesses in the city. 2, that the City of Toronto consider other options to minimize or eliminate youth access to water pipe smoking, including a retail display ban for smoking-related apparatus and paraphernalia. And lastly, that Toronto Public Health undertake a public education campaign aimed especially at youth and young adults using traditional and social media to address the widespread misconceptions about the health risks of water pipe smoking.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And has your presentation been circulated? Have you handed that to clerks?
No, but I will.
That would be great.
Okay.
Any questions for Deputant? No? Thank you very much for coming again. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Wendy Tu. Welcome, Wendy. You have 5 minutes.
Hello, board members. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so my name is Wendy Tu, and I'd like to share a youth perspective on hookah. So I'll start off with a personal story of mine. So in grade 5, my teacher started talking to us about a topic we dreaded most, math. No, I'm kidding. It was puberty. And along those lines, she told us that her #1 deal breaker in dating was smoking. And she was a role model growing up, so I always wanted to say that when I got into a relationship. By the time I got into my first relationship, I suffered a personal loss, and so not only did I want to say this because of my teacher, it actually meant something to me. And my boyfriend at the time was very understanding, and so he said he would never smoke. And then one weekend he went to Montreal with his friends, and on social media I saw some pictures of them, you know, doing those like smoking rings, and I was really concerned. And when he got back, I went into detective mode. I sat him down in a dark room, shone a light in his face, and I asked him, is there anything you want to tell me? And he said nothing. He didn't do anything wrong. And so I told him I saw the pictures, and he had no idea that it was harmful. He told me that his friends told him that it was just water vapor and that it was completely healthy. And it's not as outlined by the medical officer of health. And so I think that a lot of youth are misinformed, as you saw in the Street Buzz video by the YAN members. And so more has to be done on, public education and maybe even labeling regulations in hookah lounges. So if they had, a poster outlining all the health effects of smoking hookah, that would help a lot, because a lot of youth don't know about the health risk. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone have questions? No? Thank you very much for coming and sharing your story. Really appreciate it. Next up, we have Sarah Butson and Chris Yaketo. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Board of Health and counselors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. My name is Sarah Butson, and this is my colleague, Chris Yaketo. We are here today to represent the Ontario Lung Association, which supports the recommendations put forward by the Medical Officer of Health, calling for the prohibition of hookah use in licensed establishments. I'm going to use my opportunity today to emphasize that unregulated hookah establishments undermine our good work in supporting a smoke-free Ontario. I'll also highlight water pipes' rising popularity, direct and indirect health impacts, and what others are doing on this issue. While I'm here today to represent the Lung Association, as a citizen of Toronto, I also have a vested interest in this issue. I went to university when you were allowed to smoke indoors. In fact, I paid for my tuition by waitressing in mostly a smoking section of a restaurant. We would take fresh air breaks, and I remember coming home smelling of smoke. I cringe to think about the potential impact on my lungs from having worked in those conditions. When legislation was passed, it was a relief, and the restaurant industry stayed strong. Fast forward a few years later, just a few, I'm a mother, and now live on the Danforth, where in a one-block stretch, I can count 3 places with smoking inside. I'm appalled that waitresses in these establishments are facing the same hazardous working conditions today. We've faced these challenges before. We've seen the impact on workers in these establishments before, but yet the issue is creeping up in another form. Where we have done an incredible job regulating and protecting citizens from exposure related to cigarette smoke, hookah establishments remain a glaring gap. 10 years ago, the World Health Organization identified water pipe use as a serious potential health hazard. Water pipe smoke contains nicotine, carbon monoxide, carcinogens, and may contain greater amounts of tar and heavy metals than cigarette smoke. This smoke is delivered in heavy doses. In a typical hookah session, a user consumes about 100 to 200 times the volume of smoke compared to a cigarette. Widespread public education alongside legislation is needed to dispel myths around health effects of hookah use. Most users believe hookah is safe, especially young people where it's rising in popularity. Enticing flavors like white gummy bear, pineapple, and double apple are a draw for this crowd. In fact, a recent study by the Ontario Tobacco Research Unit found that there has been a rise in hookah use amongst young Canadians. Since 2006, use amongst young people has more than doubled to 14% of 15 to 19-year-olds and 29% of 20 to 24-year-olds. This means that almost 1/3 of young adults in Canada are using hookah. The effects of hookah do not stop at the individual user, but pose significant air quality concerns. Carbon monoxide levels inside hookah cafes have been found to be 89 times higher than outdoors, and spending 2 hours in a hookah cafe is equal to smoking approximately 10 cigarettes. Additionally, the exposure to fine particulate matter, which is inhaled deep into the lungs, is alarmingly high. Ontario's air quality index indicates that measures over 91 micrograms per cubic meter of air have possible serious respiratory effects. A forest fire, for instance, is 250, and the indoor air of a hookah cafe is 1,400, as evidenced through the good research of our partners at OTRU. In Toronto, you can walk into a hookah establishment, pick your flavor, and smoke indoors. This is one area where we are failing to protect workers, the general public, and youth from exposure to serious health hazards. Significant progress has been made worldwide. Many Middle Eastern countries, including Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, have enacted bans or restrictions on hookah. In Canada, 3 provinces and over 10 municipalities regulate hookah use. Toronto and the province of Ontario have been leaders in taking progressive steps to ensure the next generation does not smoke, including the recent passage of Bill 45. The absence of any regulation on hookah use, however, undermines this progress. It is critical that Toronto, a world-class city, continues to assert itself as a leader in protecting the health of its citizens through supporting this call for a ban on hookah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris, are you wanting to?
No, please. Echoed very well.
Sounds good. I like that. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you both very much for coming out. Really appreciate that. And next we have Roberta Ferenc. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I thought maybe I didn't have to present because I'm from the Ontario Tobacco Research Unit. Our work has found its way into so many reports, and I'm delighted to see that. At the present time, I'm the former director of the Ontario Tobacco Research Unit, and I'm now the senior scientific advisor. And we're located in the Dalla Lana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. I'm an epidemiologist with roughly 20 years' experience in research on secondhand smoke. I was an expert witness in the challenge to the Vancouver bylaw we heard about earlier, and I was the lead on the Toronto water pipe study, or hookah study. I wrote my report using the word water pipe, and I had changed to that because when I told people I was doing research on hookah, they said, "You're doing research on hookers?" Anyway. What do we know about water pipe or about hookah? And you've heard a lot today, but I think a lot of it bears repeating. Hookah smoke is toxic. It contains high levels of fine particulates, the ones that get into your lungs and cause heart disease and cancer, carbon monoxide, benzene, and levels are higher in hookah smoke than in cigarette smoke of benzene, which causes leukemia. Heavy metals and other contaminants like volatile aldehydes, like formaldehyde. The water, there's a misconception that the water in a water pipe filters the smoke, and actually there's a new study out on that, and it's not a significant reduction in heavy metals in the smoke. Most of the smoke, 75 to 90% in a water pipe, comes from the charcoal. So it doesn't really matter whether you're smoking herbal or tobacco hookah because the majority of the smoke is coming from the charcoal. And the truth is, if you burn anything, if you smoke lettuce, you'll get toxic smoke. It's any sort of vegetable matter. So tobacco has its own problems because it has additional carcinogens, but you can get quite enough to do a lot of damage without that. The tobacco or herbal product is not just warmed. A lot of people say, well, it's just being warmed, so it's not really burning. But I talked to one of the world experts who's overseas about this, who's done all the major laboratory studies. And there is what they call pyrolysis, and that's from the word for fire. So it's low temperature burning, because you don't get smoke unless you're warming something to a certain temperature. And actually at lower temperatures, you get more particulates and more bad stuff than you do you get a cleaner burn at higher temperatures. So that's not a strong argument. Except for nicotine, as I mentioned, there's no difference in the toxicity of tobacco and herbal hookah smoke. There have been laboratory studies getting machines to smoke the same way that people do, and it produced pretty much the same results except for the nicotine. Hookah's use among Ontario students is now actually higher. Well, that was 2013. We won't get the results for this year until a little bit later than cigarette use. So that is very concerning. And of course, there are serious health effects. And it's taken over 100 years to find out all the health effects for tobacco, and they're still happening. So the data aren't as advanced, but we now know that it does cause cancer, coronary heart disease, chronic bronchitis, emphysema, high blood pressure, impaired lung function, carbon monoxide intoxication, obstetrical complications, osteoporosis, gum disease, and several infectious diseases, even if you use disposable mouthpieces, because you may be sucking up bacteria and other stuff from the pipe itself. It's not known as a sanitary procedure. And as Lorraine Fry mentioned, most of the use now is not traditional use. The new epidemic started 25 years ago in Syria and has been tracked by other researchers over that period. So most of the hookah smoking is not traditional. What did we find out in the Toronto water pipe study?
If I could get you to wrap up, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very quickly, hookah cafes, they all served some tobacco products in contravention of the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. And the average levels were actually as high as the average for smoky bars before the bans. The levels of smoke found toxic smoke surpass many of the occupational health and safety bylaws in this province. Non-smokers are exposed to very high levels. Our non-smoking staff actually, after 2 hours exposure, had blood CO levels as high as a regular smoker. And that outdoor use, as was mentioned, can result in hazardous levels.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
I just want to mention in closing that the Ontario Tobacco Research Unit has developed a new infographic on
excellent.
On hookah. I brought several copies with me, and you can obtain more.
Thank you.
And
thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Anyone have any questions? No? All right. Do we have anyone else who'd like to speak on this topic? No? All right. So now let's bring it into questions of staff. Councillor Nunziata.
To Dr. McEwen, you mentioned when you made your presentation that you spoke to the Executive Director of Licensing and legal staff?
Yes, the recommendation that's before you, as well as the one that's in the upcoming report from the Executive Director of Licensing, were done in consultation with legal.
And the Executive Director, so you're saying that they're discussing it in their June meeting?
Yes.
But discussing the whole report?
Well, this report is intended to go to licensing and standards to have it at the same time as the Executive Director's report on the same subject.
But one of your recommendations, the first recommendation is effective October the 1st to prohibit, but it hasn't gone to licensing yet, so.
No, this is a policy recommendation from the board, if the board adopts it, to licensing and standards and council.
The licensing and standards would have to support your recommendation, or it doesn't. October 1st, there's no effective date.
There wouldn't be an effective date until council has made a decision.
I understand. So you're just asking, licensing and standards have to approve this, not the Board of Health?
Well, in other situations, the Board of Health has made a recommendation directly to City Council, and Council has approved it. We just chose to work with licensing and standards because it makes sense, since
Well,
it's
it
the
makes
licensing
sense,
bylaw.
No, I agree, it makes sense. So my other question was, have you consulted with, in your report, you say that there's 60 businesses?
Yes.
In Toronto, right? So did you consult with those 60 on the report?
We consulted with as many as we could, and not as many as we'd hoped. And they were concerned, obviously, about a regulatory approach. I did report here that there were mixed reviews on the regulatory approach. Most of the negative comments came from current business owners.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter, you have some questions?
Yes, Peter Wong. Thank you, Dr. McKeown, for that insightful report. My question really is around what are we going to, how are we going to actually show through the bylaw process that health has actually improved? What are we actually going to follow to say that after the bylaws have been passed, that health of the population has actually improved? Or what are the indicators that we will follow?
I suspect, given the number of establishments and users, we may not be able to measure health outcomes attributable to the bylaw directly. We should be able to see changes in patterns of use in the same surveys, which are now showing us that young people are increasingly taking up this practice. And I think that would be a very positive outcome.
That's your questions? Thank you. Councillor Cressy, questions?
Thank you. Just a few quick questions, Dr. McKeown. The report notes some of the regulatory approaches from other Canadian jurisdictions. Can you expand a little bit about other provinces or municipalities, especially in Ontario, and what approach they've taken on this issue?
Well, you heard from the deputant some of the recent, modest changes made by the provincial government. That's the only regulatory approach that we're aware of from them. There are some smaller municipalities, Barrie, Peterborough, that have essentially legislated a ban. Now, they don't have large numbers of premises who are currently doing this activity, so my understanding of their approach was it was more preventive than anything else. They didn't want to see this practice introduced and expanded in their jurisdiction because of its health concerns. Beyond Ontario, there are a number of provincial and municipal jurisdictions that have implemented a prohibition. How they've done it varies a little bit depending on their local circumstances and what legislation was already in place.
And what about other provinces?
Well, as the report says, I think Alberta, Nova Scotia, am I missing one or two? Quebec have all implemented a province-wide ban. Again, how they've done it sometimes has been in addition to their existing legislation. If the legislation defines smoking more broadly than Ontario's tobacco legislation does, then it's easier for them to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other questions from any board members? No? Okay, so I have an amendment I'd like to add, please. If we could put this on the screen. City Council requests Government of Ontario to enact provincial legislation that will prohibit the use of hookahs, water pipes in all restaurants, bars, entertainment establishments, patios, regardless of whether the substance being smoked is tobacco-based or non-tobacco-based shisha. We've heard today that it doesn't have to be tobacco being smoked to affect people's health. It's the fact it goes over the carbon, which heats up and lets off, I couldn't say crud, but that's maybe not quite the right word, carcinogenics. And the other thing is, as we saw in the video, people don't realize that the secondhand smoke is also not good for your health. So we heard from one lady who did a deputation that she worked in a restaurant, in a bar, and she now doesn't know how much secondhand smoke she was taking in. It'll be the same idea of people who are working in these water pipe places where they're allowed to smoke. You're affecting the health of the workers as well. So I thank staff for this report. I also want to do a big shout out, and there's one or two of you left here, the Youth Health Action Network. Thank you so much for taking us up. We did ask you to come and help us to go out and talk to the youth. They will probably approach you far better than they'd approach us. And as I say, your video was very informative because we do need to do better education. And I love your card. I think that is great. I think that's a way that, pretty pictures with a small amount of writing, I think is how we get to youth these days. They don't want to read pages and pages and pages of reports. I know my kids don't. In fact, they roll their eyes when I start talking about long reports. I think that is great. And I think that, maybe you'll help us also with that more education and helping us how the best way to educate youth. But I also agree, I think we should be getting into the younger kids. We should be getting into, I hate to say, maybe even the elementary schools now as well, because that's where they first hear about this. And we all know that if we can educate our children at a younger age, they're less likely to try something later on. They're less likely to follow a peer later on because they'll have the information and they'll know what's good and bad for them. So I think this report is great. I thank everyone who worked on it. And therefore, I am moving my amendment plus the recommendations before us. So we'll vote first on my amendment. So all those in favor? Anyone opposed? And then, okay? And then adopt as amended. All those in favor? And anyone opposed? Excellent, so those pass. Thank you very much. All right, moving right along, we're on number 2, which is the health impacts of expanding gambling at the Woodbine Racetrack. We do have some speakers on this item. The first speaker up is Robert Murray. Is Robert here? Excellent. Thank you for being patient. Really appreciate that. Welcome, and
Thank you.
you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Robert Murray. I'm a manager within the Problem Gambling Institute of Ontario. The Institute is a program of the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health, otherwise known as CAMH. CAMH is the largest addiction and mental health hospital in Canada and a teaching hospital fully affiliated with the University of Toronto. Our institute has the largest specialized gambling treatment program in Ontario. We provide training and support to Ontario's specialized problem gambling treatment system and a broad range of allied professionals. We have a website. It contains interactive online support for people with gambling problems, and we've also been in the business of providing support to the industry since 2005. We currently work with the OLG, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Many individuals in Ontario gamble. Most do so without causing harm to themselves or others, but about 2.5% of Ontarians have moderate to severe gambling problems. In Toronto, there therefore are about 11,000 people with severe gambling problems and over 100,000 more with moderate problems. And when you think about that number, understand that 6 or 7 people will be affected by each one of those individuals. So we're talking about a lot of people that are affected by problem gambling. People with gambling problems experience a range of harms, including mental health issues like depression, anxiety, and substance use. People who gamble are also at increased risk of suicide. A significantly higher proportion of problem gamblers report having thoughts of committing suicide in their lifetime compared to the general public. The Canadian Safety Council, an independent advocacy group, believes that more than 200 problem gamblers take their lives each year in Canada. Many people who gamble also experience dysfunctional relationships and financial difficulties because of their gambling. These harms affect not only the people with gambling problems, but also their families and communities. Very seriously, it's estimated that 1/4 of Ontario's gambling revenues come from problem gamblers. This number is even higher for casino table games. Fully 57% of money gambled on table games comes from people with gambling problems. Based on this evidence, it's reasonable to expect that a high percentage of additional revenues from Woodbine expansion would be contributed by people who are struggling with gambling problems. We recognize that gambling is a reality in Ontario, and it already takes place in many forms at Woodbine. But research from around the world shows that increases in gaming availability are associated with increases in problem gambling. So expansion at Woodbine will likely lead to an increase in the number of problem gamblers, particularly in the immediate area surrounding the facility. The OLG has an extensive responsible gambling program that we would say is one of the better programs in the world. As previously noted, our organization collaborates with the OLG on that initiative. We provide consultation services and we train their employees on how to intervene with customers who are showing signs of being in trouble. However, you should know that while it's important this work gets done, it should also be understood that there is no evidence to indicate that these efforts have a significant impact on decreasing the prevalence of problem gambling in casino venues. We are particularly concerned that we have very limited impact on early prevention of problem gambling. In conclusion, there's considerable evidence that expanding Woodbine Racetrack would likely have a negative health impact on some individuals. The Center for Addiction and Mental Health endorses the recommendation by the Medical Officer of Health that City Council maintain its opposition to expanded gambling in Toronto. We also endorse the MOH's recommendation that if the city opts to expand gambling at Woodbine, it should require the facility to maintain its existing and planned responsible gambling measures and to close for a minimum of 6 hours a day. Since a disproportionate number of people with gambling problems play between midnight and closing, and many Ontario problem gambling treatment providers report that extended hours have negative impacts on clients, this recommendation is key. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Trustee Glover.
Yes, hi, I have a few questions actually. The first one is around terminology. The DSM 3 and 4 classified gambling problems under disorders, and then DSM 5 changed it to addictions and related disorders. Can you talk about the reasoning for changing to this other section?
We've used a broader term called problem gambling because it's more inclusive. We're dealing with what we call a risk continuum, where people go from no gambling to very serious pathological gambling. And so what we want to do is cover that range of issues. And what we want to do is also have a dialogue with people about their gambling problems that doesn't set up a situation where they get defensive, where they feel labeled. So it's our term to, again, cover the broader areas, but we use the term pathological gambling when we're talking about the people who are most seriously affected.
But so using the term problem gambling, it doesn't mean it is an addiction.
For those people in the middle area, what we're seeing is people starting to get into trouble with it.
Right.
And we don't want to start being concerned about people's gambling until they become addicted to the point where, they're really seriously affected.
Okay, there was some, in the report, they talked a little bit about brain imaging, or maybe it was another article, brain imaging, and that the brain image of somebody who's addicted to gambling is very similar to someone who's addicted to other drugs. Like they have the same.
As we're starting to find out, the impact of gambling is very similar to the impact of other kinds of addictions. It's a behavioral addiction, it's a process addiction, and something is going on in the brains of those people. It's affecting their dopamine system, it's doing something, and we feel it does change the circuitry of your brain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is very similar to drugs in that way.
Yeah, there are different parts of the brain we think that are activated, but the processes seem to be somewhat similar.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep it short. I just want to ask two more questions. You said that the percentage of problem gamblers who would be there at the casino, after midnight would be higher. Do you have a number? Do you know how many?
No, we don't. We haven't had a chance to do that kind of research, but research that has been done in other parts of the world indicate that.
Yeah, okay, and you mentioned that
Remember, who do you think is gambling at 4 a.m. in the morning? Especially in a facility that's open 24 hours a day. There are many people that are going to have been there many hours. Pardon?
Okay, so you suspect that it's actually a very high percentage. At 4 a.m., if you went into a casino and did a test, you'd think that a large percentage of people would have a gambling problem.
What I can tell you is the people that we treat at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, they report that.
Okay.
When they were gambling problematically, oftentimes they were the ones in the seats at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Okay. Okay. Let's see, you mentioned that 25% of OLG revenue comes from problem gamblers. And you mentioned that 0.8% of the general population are problem gamblers, 2.2% are at-risk gamblers.
About that, yep.
So the 25% of revenue is just from that 0.8%.
It's for people who are problematically involved, and that could also include that broader group of
at risk
that are problematically but not necessarily pathologically involved in gambling.
Okay. Okay. And the suicide, you mentioned 200 in Canada, and you also mentioned proximity to the casino as being an issue. Is there any studies that indicate, and the proximity means that the closer you live to a casino, the more likely people will develop gambling problems?
Exactly. That's what, yes. Okay. That's what the research shows. The closer you are to a casino, the greater the health impact.
Right. And is there a percentage of problem gamblers, like the 200 that commit suicide, is there a percentage that, could you predict when you open a casino, how many people within a certain proximity would actually end up committing suicide?
Sir, I don't think we have the data.
No.
We just know that.
You don't have the data, but it is, if you had the data, if you were to search for the data, do you think you would find it?
I'm not sure that kind of research has been done. Especially since if you're looking at 200 gamblers committing suicide per year in Canada, that's a very small number of people compared to the rest of the population.
Right.
The other problem we have is identifying people who have committed suicide because of gambling. Coroners right now aren't required to report that and aren't required to investigate it. So even if a family suspects it, it may not get recorded as such.
So the 200 you think is a low number?
We think it's an underestimate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Trustee. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much for coming and joining us today. Our next deputant is Jason Applebaum. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And you have 5 minutes.
Great. Greetings, everyone. I'm Jason Applebaum, a former gaming industry professional, recovered problem gambler. My career background is in table games, and in 2011, after a 12-year career, I quit my job to focus on my recovery. Currently, I am the proprietor of Responsible Gambling Services, and through prevention and education, I provide people, groups, and organizations with unique and valuable perspective on problem gambling, recovery, and responsible gambling. I'm gambling neutral and view gambling as entertainment in which people may choose or not choose to participate in. Through Responsible Gambling Services, it is my goal to give people accurate information so that if they should choose to gamble, they can make informed choices. With that said, I'm neither for or against gaming expansion at Woodbine, but I want to take the opportunity to share my story of problem gambling and make myself available to the board to answer any questions that they may have about my experience as a gaming professional or a problem gambler. To start off, problem gambling has taken its toll on me financially, emotionally, physically, and familial. Financially, I've lost about somewhere in the 6-digit money. I've lost my RSP, and once I quit my job, I had to move back home with my parents. Emotionally, I became a shell of a person, bitter, hate-filled, and enraged, and pretty much my mentality was I want what I want when I want it. Physically, I was lazy, not eating a proper diet, eating a lot of fast food, and through my family, I had a lot of bailouts, and there was a lot of tension because of my gambling. And looking at risk factors as to why I became a problem gambler, there was no real one single cause, and it was just a mix of varying factors influencing my progression towards problem gambling. Some of the risk factors were when I was younger, I had a big win early in my gambling history. I think I was 8 years old playing bingo on a cruise ship with my parents, and I won $600 in a week. And at 8 years old, I made that connection. Hey, gambling is a good way to make money. And clearly that was not true. I had erroneous beliefs about how gambling worked, and that would make me think that once I lost my money, it was reasonable to win it back by chasing my losses. And obviously, once your money's gone, the more you gamble, the more you're going to lose. So I felt I had the ability to control my luck and the outcomes, but really I just didn't understand the randomness behind how casino games work. I have definitely had accessibility to my preferred form of gambling. When I was living in Niagara Falls, my drive to the casino was 5 minutes, and pretty much when I was living in Toronto, my closest drive, other than Woodbine, was 90 minutes. So I went from going from about once a month to 4 days a week. I had continuous exposure to gambling, working inside the industry. Pretty much I was desensitized to gambling. and I would gamble excessively, and that would seem normal because I saw everyone else gambling. I had financial problems, and the more I would gamble, the more I would lose. My finances get worse, and I would get into that cycle of trying to win back my money. And finally, I had a history of mental health issues. When I was a student at Wilfrid Laurier University, I developed social anxiety, and I didn't know what social anxiety was. Being a student in the early 90s, really, there wasn't much known about mental health back then, so somehow I realized when I'm gambling, I didn't have that social anxiety, and I connected that when I gamble, it alleviates my symptoms, so I'm just going to continue gambling, and that pretty much didn't work out well for me. So what does problem gambling behavior look like? For me, it was about accessing funds, and to alleviate financial pressures, I secured a $10,000 loan at 28% interest, which to me at the time, to me now is like, are you kidding me? Who takes out a $10,000 loan at 30% interest? But really, my brain was hijacked because I only needed $7,500, and because I was getting $10,000, that left me with $2,500 to gamble with today, and that was my motivating factor to take out that loan. I knew it was bad judgment, but again, at the end of the day, getting the money superseded all logic and good sense. I used a lot of payday loans during my gambling time. I would, one specific example, I took out $500, or it went with my paycheck, I lost my paycheck, went right back to payday loan, got another $500, went right back to casino, and lost that. And by not understanding how the games worked, I felt I could win my money back again, but clearly not a great thing. And once you're in that trap of payday loans, it's really hard to get out. I want to talk about the zone. I don't know if you guys heard of this. When you're gambling, you're pretty much in the zone. You're just so focused on the machine that nothing else outside of that world matters. And it's basically a being of nothing, no worries, no anxiety, only safety and numbness. And at that point, money became my drug, and I just needed money to maintain that being in the zone. And I would only lose the casino when I was broke or if it closed. And once I lost all my money, reality came crashing back in. And finally, I figured out about the zone when I was gambling, and after 5 minutes of walking to the casino, I won $600, and I wanted to gloat, and I called a friend and said, hey, I just won $600. He said, great, leave. I'm like, leave? I'm not leaving. I just now have money to gamble all day. So that made me realize that I wasn't there to gamble for money. I was there because it was doing something to my brain. And finally, so I figured out it was social anxiety or anxiety as to why I was gambling. And just to wrap it up, I finally got into recovery, and I did many different treatment modalities. I had a wellness recovery plan, and my recovery was made up of Gamblers Anonymous, support of family, of friends, voluntary self-exclusion from the casino. I read a lot of books, I exercised, ate a healthy diet, played sports, had some relapse, and had treatment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Crisanti has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation. And I truly, sincerely commend you for your courage to come out here and speak to us. And
thank you.
And for coming out of a very difficult situation. Addiction is, obviously addictions, all addictions are very serious and very, terribly hurtful. Just wanted to ask you in terms of your particular addiction, and what do you think it really will make a difference if you're truly addicted to something, whether let's say in this case, a casino or is shut down for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours, that you will not be inclined to want to go back as soon as it's open?
No, I mean, when I was a gambler in this system and I was gambling at casinos that did shut down, because back in the early 2000s, some of the OLG casinos did shut down, I would go home and it would give me a timeout and break me out of that zone. So once, I didn't go home and sleep 4 hours, 6 hours, I was closed. I had that timeout, and it forced me to go back into my day-to-day life.
But did you go back?
Did I go back to the casino right away?
No, not right away, at some point.
No, it gave me a forced timeout.
And you never went back then?
Oh, no, I went back.
You did go, that's what I'm trying to establish.
Yeah, but I think there needs to be a distinction between someone in my position who's a problem gambler. That, to me, that isn't the safeguard for problem gambling. It's for people that aren't addicted yet. And I know when I was gambling, it was a safeguard for me. And then once I moved to into Niagara Falls, where there was 24-hour gaming, that safeguard was gone, and that allowed me to progress further and further down the continuum of problem gambling.
May I ask what type of gambling were you addicted to?
I did all types of gambling, but what really progressed me down the problem gambling continuum was slot machines.
The slot machines?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and in this case, we already have slot machines. We're really talking about expanded gaming in terms of table games. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Trustee Glover? Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit, I don't want you to name any names or anything, but I mean, I do appreciate you coming out, and it's interesting to hear your story, because numbers say one thing, but it's good to actually hear a narrative from somebody. Can you talk, and now you're working with people who have gambling problems?
No, I'm in prevention.
Sorry?
I'm not a clinician.
No?
No, I'm trying to bring prevention education. I want to minimize problem gambling. I want to get to them before they become like me.
Right. And how do you do that?
That's a good question. So I just started this business, and based on my experience, I'm just writing a lot of blogs on my personal experience. And I also, because I worked in the industry and I have 12 years experience, I understand the casino culture and environment, and I try and create programming that goes further than the messaging that's going on now. Like, everyone knows not to gamble because you're going to lose. Everyone knows to set a time limit. Everyone knows to set a money limit. But a lot of people don't understand the why. And what I would like to do is try to, take my experience and make people, for example, youth who might just go to the casino. They don't understand how blackjack works. They don't understand how the house edge grinds you away in the long run. And because they don't see it, they feel they have a false sense of belief that they can overcome and win money at gambling. But I want to educate them as to why in blackjack, how the casino makes money, and how every bet the casino's taking pennies on your dollar, and over the long run, you're always going to lose. And I'd like to instill that informed education in them, so when they choose to gamble, they have informed consent.
When you were, really struggling with gambling, if people had told you that information then, would that have helped you stop?
No, it wouldn't have. However, if I would have had this information when I was growing up in the early 80s to late 80s, I think it would help, because one of the first things I learned from my parents is when you're gambling, you always bet big on a winning streak and always bet the minimum on a losing streak. So right there, as a kid, I realized there are streaks, and there's a way for me to control my luck or control the odds against me. But as an adult now, after I've gone through recovery and I've educated myself, there are no streaks in gambling. It's only randomness. So if there's only randomness, then anytime I bet money, whatever I bet, that money's exposed to the house edge. And having that information, then I would realize, well, if I'm down 100 and I know the odds are, I can't win my money back, I have to accept that loss and accept the game as entertainment, it's time to walk away.
Okay, well, look, I congratulate you for the struggle that you've gone through and coming up victorious in the end. Thank you very much for coming to speak today.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have questions? I have a quick question then.
Sure.
In our report today, the recommendation would be that if expansion of gambling is approved at Woodbine, that we require the facility to maintain all responsible gambling measures currently in place, and that hours of operations be limited to no more than 18 hours a day. Would you support those recommendations?
Yes, I would.
And you said that if you'd had to stop because the place was closing, it would give you time to think and go away and...
It just breaks me out of that zone, because I'm locked in. I got the horse blinders on. I'm just locked in and focused on the machine. And if come 4 a.m. or 6 a.m. it's time to go home, I'm automatically broken out of that zone. Whereas, I could stay in the zone for 22, 24 hours.
And do you feel that 6 hours is enough, that someone's not going to just go and park themselves in the parking lot and wait for the doors to open again?
I think that would depend on the individual and how much of a problematic gambler they are. But for at-risk gamblers and the casual gambler, I think it's a very good start to, have that break in the system.
Last question. Are there any clocks in casinos?
There are clocks, yes.
Are they digital, 24-hour, or are they...
what venue, but my understanding of what I've seen at OLG casinos, there are clocks and they are digital, and I've seen them at the cashiers and I've seen them in the washrooms.
But they're not visible while you're actually gambling then?
No, I've sat at an OLG casino and looked at the cashier and saw the clock, just like I see that clock right there. I've seen that, yeah. I commend OLG and the initiative they've taken at RG in responsible gambling.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? If not, we will... Oh, yeah. So I'm just going to see if there's anyone else who wants to... Yeah, I'm just asking if there's any other deputants who'd like to speak. And now we'll bring it into the committee for questions of staff. Any questions of staff? Councillor Carmichael Greb.
Thank you very much. Did you consult with the OLG when you made this report?
Yes, we did. We met with senior staff and a board member.
And what was their sort of take on only being open for 18 hours a day? Since it's not the normal sort of model for...
Well, there are some OLG casinos that are not open 24 hours a day, so it's within their business model. The main content of our meeting with them was to hear more about the responsible gambling approaches which are currently being used or under consideration or being piloted or tested within OLG. Many of the recommendations, and when we dealt with this issue earlier, we made a number of different recommendations for mitigating measures which could help reduce the likelihood of an impact on problem gambling. Many of those at that time, OLG said, were not consistent with their business approach. And I think that, the people we were talking to were mostly the people within OLG who are running the responsible gambling initiatives, and I think they're trying to do a good job. But they would defer to the people who are responsible for the commercial operations on some of these issues.
So when you met with them on this particular report, you did not discuss with them being opened 18 hours a day?
No, we did talk about that. It was one of many things that we asked them about whether it was possible. And I think, if I recall, I think the answer was that it would depend on the sort of commercial viability of that proposal.
And did they give you a commercial viability of being opened?
They did not.
Okay.
But to be fair, the people we were talking to were mostly the people who are responsible for the responsible gambling component of OLG's work.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Glover. Sorry, yep, ask your questions.
Okay,
of staff.
sorry. Yeah, call me trustee.
I'm sorry,
I was looking around. Who are you?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let's see. Yeah. I want to ask a few questions about, the advertising, the OLG. I mean, the one thing that really stuck out for me is that 25% of the revenue comes from problem gamblers. So the OLG, 25% of their income is coming from people who are having a serious mental health issue, and that, could potentially be destroying themselves and their families, and potentially committing suicide as well. How did we get to the point of having a 24-hour slot machine casino at Woodbine in the city? Did the Board of Health or did City Council take part in a decision at some point?
Well, if I could just comment on the proportion, there is disagreement, and I think, in industry, people would generally say that number is not accurate, but it's difficult to get an accurate number, and it seems evident from the epidemiology of problem gambling that problem gamblers are overrepresented, at least in the revenues, whether it's 25% or 20% or 15%, they are making a bigger contribution to revenues than people who are not problem gambling. As far as how Woodbine was established in its current form, all I know is that apart from the report that was done at the time when City Council was considering gambling expansion as a part of OLG's efforts to expand gambling across the province, apart from that occasion, I don't believe the Board of Health has been involved in earlier policy decisions. I can't speak to City Council or the city's involvement.
Right. And does the city have the power to actually force them to shut down for 6 hours a day?
Well, OLG has taken the position that it will consult with and get agreement from local municipalities about any expansion that takes place, and I believe that sets the stage for the city to actually make its agreement contingent.
Okay, thank you.
And the city manager is also going to be reporting on this issue to City Council, and we'll be talking about a number of issues that the city is concerned about with an expansion and looking for ways to influence OLG's decision.
Okay. I don't know our process here yet, but so we're asking questions now and then later, do we make comments?
Yes, you do.
Okay, thank you.
You'll have a chance to speak, yes. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor.
Just one question. Right now, Woodbine is open 24/7, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
That was the quickest question yet. Thank you.
24 hours now.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to go to speakers. We'll go to the visiting councillor first.
Thank you. I'm always chosen first, it seems. Today is my lucky day.
It is your lucky day.
Yeah, thank
Are
you.
you gambling on that one?
Yeah, I'm good, I'm good. So, well, as we just heard, I think I'll start off by just reminding my colleagues around this table and members of this committee that Woodbine is open 24 hours currently. The report in front of us speaks to two motions. One is Part A and B, one that says require the facility to maintain all existing and planned responsible gaming measures. Well, that's fine, and I believe they will. But when it comes to attempting to tell the OLG how to operate their casino, that decision, Part B of that motion, is entirely up to the OLG. And so I also want to remind everyone that, expanded gaming at Woodbine is very much an important matter that has the potential to act as a catalyst that will spark revitalization in North Etobicoke and create new jobs. This is primarily, the direction we want to take it, to make it a premier destination place in an area of the city that really desperately needs our attention. And it'll be beneficial to all of the city at the end if we do this properly. And it's also to protect the current horse racing job stock while bringing stability to this sector as well. Knowing that any support for the horse racing part of it that's there now is going to expire in the next couple of years, and they're desperately looking to find some new revenue to help them maintain it and sustain it over the upcoming years. And also expanding gaming will allow our municipality to stay competitive within the GTA, attracting new visitors and to a new premier entertainment destination spot that I mentioned earlier. We know that there will be increased revenues to the city. We've talked about that, and it will help protect the taxpayer and that will help in itself will help protect the taxpayers from increased taxes. And also important to remember the OLG mandates responsible gaming initiatives at its sites to help mitigate issues with problem gambling and addiction. And they do that very, very well. And I've reviewed the Board of Health report on expanded gaming that we have here in front of us. And so while I appreciate what we're trying to do, it's important that we look at this item with all its components in place to help council make a clear decision. So I'm saying this isn't the place to do it. That I would suggest that this item gets referred. I believe there's a motion that's going to address that, and one of the members have it, and that this should be referred. While I appreciate the recommendations made by this committee, it will be, again, too early to set these parameters on this matter, and as the OLG is in the process of identifying a new operator to run its gaming facilities, and these operators would look for competitive venues to take over and operate. So there are no studies to indicate that a reduction in gaming hours at Woodbine would benefit public health and mitigating problem gambling. And we have had no formal response or assessment from the OLG regarding the recommendations put forward by the Toronto Public Health. So we need to send a clear message to the province and OLG on where we stand on this matter, with the understanding that we will work together with the OLG to make sure that expanding gaming at Woodbine is vetted through our planning process and reflects the best interests for our city and our community. And so I would ask this committee to refer this item to the June 30th Executive Committee for consideration, as the full staff report on expanding gaming will be reviewed at that time, and remind people that Woodbine has been operating in the manner that they're operating, essentially as a full casino, a full electronic casino since about 2000, I believe. And they've been a tremendous community partner in many, many ways. These are things that we've talked about many, many times. So we need to support this concept and be fair in supporting this concept right through, and ensure that we have that all the information in front of us, and not attempt to make decisions, in part. And so I encourage this committee to support the motion that hopefully you will see in the next couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other visiting councillors? Okay, next I'm going to Councillor Cressy, then we're coming to Councillor Carmichael Greb, and if anyone else wants to speak, just wave at me. Thank you.
So we're a new Board of Health, and I think it's important for all of us to recognize that the reason we're talking about this today is because City Council asked the Board of Health for its opinion. So with all due respect to my colleague who's asking us to defer this, it was City Council in its majority who passed a motion just a few months ago asking us as the Board of Health to consider the social and health implications. So we're here today because City Council asked us to make a decision. And we're here today to make a decision as the Board of Health to look at the social and health implications of casinos. We can talk about economic development, and I'll make a few comments on it, but that's not what City Council asked us to do. City Council asked us to look at the social and health impacts. When we make critical decisions that impact the type of city that we live in, we have to look at it from all angles. And that's exactly why we have a Board of Health. And so when we look at the type of city that we want to live in, that our vision is, what is a healthy city? What is a city that cares for its residents? Along that level, when you think about the social and health impacts, what's an economy that is sustainable in that it builds people up as opposed to relying on the vulnerable? And so casinos have long been debated in this city. Just 2 years ago, the Board of Health right here with a different membership debated this at length. And the Board of Health in 2013 voiced strong opposition to the expansion of casino and gambling facilities in Toronto, including at Woodbine. And they did that because, as this report has shown, the research is very clear. We may have only 11,000 problem gamblers in Ontario, but we have 129,000 people at risk of becoming problem gamblers. And the consequences, as we've heard, are many. It's dysfunctional for relationships. It leads to increased risk of suicide. The health impacts on mental health and addictions are significant and severe. The people who are most at risk tend to be men, Aboriginals, people of low income. And the revenue, this is what bothers me. This is the important number. So we say that maybe 1 to 2.2% of gamblers are problem gamblers, but those 1 to 2.2% create 24% of the revenue. So here we have an economic model that is predicated on problem gamblers. It's an economic model that is growing its revenue disproportionately from those who aren't doing well. And I would just point out, if we are going to talk on the economic development angle, though that's not what the Board of Health is here to do, that it's not a sustainable sector. That casinos are actually a declining sector in North America. We've had casinos closed throughout North America over the last decade. 8 casinos in Ontario have lost revenue every year for 10 straight years. So not only are we not building a sustainable industry, but as the Board of Health, most importantly, it's not a caring industry. And so I would close by saying that our focus as the Board of Health on the health and social impacts should be, just as it says in this report, that the most effective mitigation is simply to not expand gambling. The way you mitigate against the social and health impacts, problematic impacts of gambling, is to not expand gambling. It's been our position before at this board. Council asked us what our position was today, a direction from Council, and I hope we maintain the position as is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Next speaker is Councillor Carmichael Greb.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have a motion to refer this item, please, if you could put that up. That the Board of Health refer item HL 4.2 to the Executive Committee on June 30th, 2015, with the request that the Executive Committee direct the acting city manager to report directly to Council with additional information on how the limitation of hours of operation to 18 hours a day, as proposed by the Medical Officer of Health in his report of May 15th, 2015, would affect the operations of the casino, the scope of prospective operators, and the economic viability of the proposal, including the financial impacts to the city. I'm referring this, I don't believe we have enough information to make a decision on this, on the hours of operation. I'd like to get more information on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Next speaker is Councillor Nunziata.
Yes, thank you, and I will be supporting the motion by Councillor Carmichael Greb. Councillor Cressy is absolutely correct. Council directed, But if you read the summary, that council directed and authorized the city manager to conduct public consultation and prepare a report for the June 30th meeting. So it's appropriate that this report from the medical officer of health go to the June 30th meeting, because all that information from the consultation meetings that the city manager conducted would be part of that report. So it all should be part of the same report, not a separate report. So it is appropriate to refer it, because that's when the item will be on the agenda for discussion. So I will be supporting that motion. And just talking about the casino itself. Yes, council did discuss casinos, Councillor Cressy, a couple years ago, and actually, it was only one vote. It was only one vote that separated the decision, and that was because there was proposals on new locations downtown, Exhibition Place. That was the item that was on the agenda. Woodbine should have never been part of that report. And I even believe that the councillor that represented that area at the time didn't realize that Woodbine was part of that whole report that came through council. Woodbine is open 24 hours now, 24/7. I personally have never been to Woodbine. But as far as gambling, you can do what you want in Toronto, but people are going, and busloads, seniors, to casinos. They're going to Niagara Falls for the entertainment. They manage themselves and on their spending, and so you're not going to stop people from going to casinos, because they're going to go, if it's in Toronto or not, they're going to the casinos. And Niagara Falls and other casinos that you have in Ontario, they're receiving all this revenue from casinos, because they're hosting the casinos. The City of Toronto is not receiving that revenue in, because we don't have that casino in Toronto. In order for us to be competitive with all the others, and rather than have City of Toronto residents take buses, take whatever, trains to go and gamble in Niagara Falls or any of the other casinos, isn't it best to keep them in Toronto and to be in the City of Toronto? If they're going to, you're not going to stop them from going. I personally am not a gambler. I do not go to the casinos. I love the entertainment. I love the shows. They have great shows in Niagara. And, and so, and a lot of the seniors in my ward, they have dates, some buses that take them there. They spend the day, they have lunch, they go see a show, and, it's entertainment for them. I'd rather have those seniors and those people stay in Toronto and enjoy the entertainment in Toronto than leave the City of Toronto. So as far as the casino issue, that will come up June 30th at the Executive Committee, the whole issue about casinos. But this report is appropriate to go to the Executive Committee, because all that other information through the public consultation meetings that were conducted should be part of that report when they discuss it.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to let you know, ZZ Top is coming to the Niagara Casino. It may be my first time setting foot in a casino, but anyway, that's another story. ZZ Top. ZZ Top, big beards, big guitars. Okay.
I go to see I like the Elvis impersonators.
Okay.
That's my favorite.
All right. Anyway.
I'm an Elvis fan. I don't go for that other stuff. No.
They're a good band, but anyway, we're off topic. Okay. Trustee Glover, you asked when you were asking questions if you'd have a chance to speak. Would you like to speak?
Comment. I've read a lot about gambling and problem gambling, and so I come to it from the other side of it. And when I look at this issue, it's, I see an industry that actually preys on people. The slot machines are designed to have near misses, so that if you have or if you're developing a gambling addiction, you will think that you're getting close to winning. There will be two cherries, And the fact is that the slot machine is actually working on an algorithm, and they set the algorithm to pay out a certain percentage. So it might pay out 80%. So if you go into a casino with $100 and your luck was totally even, if you would win $80 back and lose 20. If you rebet the 80, then you end up with 64. And if you bet the 64, by the time you're done, you'll have bet $500. You'll have won 400, and you'll have lost the original 100 that you came in with, so you will be broke. And that's what happens, to people who have gambling problems. The other thing that the casinos do is they have card readers at the bottom, like there's on the slot, on the chute. So when the dealer's pulling out the cards, they're reading the cards. And if you're a gambler who is there regularly, you have a card, a perks card, so that you actually, they know who you are, they know where you're sitting. And if you're playing 21, they will actually keep track, not at all casinos, but at some casinos, they will keep track of what you're betting. And the better you are, if you were a brilliant mathematician, you would be able to bet and you would still lose because the casino always wins. But if you are really good at betting, then they reduce your perks. If you're bad at betting, so you're losing money more quickly, then you get more, you get more free rooms, you get more free entertainment tickets. And the thing is that you see the end of it, and you see people who lose their houses, they lose their families. You see people whose childhood was disrupted by a parent who was gambling and who spent everything, and whose, every time there was some money in the house, the child had to be the parent and take care of the money in order to, have something to eat. Because if the parent with the gambling problem got the money, then that would go out on gambling and nobody would have any food. So I come to this, issue from the other side, having seen a lot of the devastation that's caused by the gambling industry. And so I will not be supporting the referral, and I will be supporting the recommendations. In fact, I wish the recommendations were stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Glover. Anyone else to speak? If not, I also have a motion, slightly different motion, to go with the recommendations that the Board of Health forward this report to Executive Committee for information when it is considering the issue of expanding gaming at Woodbine Racetrack. I agree 100% that Executive should have this report, but I believe it should go with recommendations from this board as City Council asked us to do. At the Executive, I want all the reports from any division to be there so everyone can look at everything in one place. But I also feel that we should be, as a board, sending our recommendation. We've heard some concerns today about restricting the hours at Woodbine. But we've also heard today that OLG already has many locations which only open 18 hours a day. And we've also heard from a very amazing person who came and spoke to us today that that helps. Closing that door and saying, you've got to go out of here for 6 hours helps you come out of that zone and regroup, find yourself. And by doing that, we may prevent some people from becoming addicted to gambling. Gambling is fun. I'll tell you a story. Before I came to Canada, this is aging myself, I did slot machine. It wasn't push button, it was the one-arm bandit. I did it in the local yacht club. I won £7. Only £7, which I can't even convert right now. I was able to buy all my friends a drink. And I thought, wow, this is great. And I was going to go put more money in. I thought, well, I've already spent that £7 on my friends. What happens if I want more drinks? And it's funny, even at that age, I was in my mid-teens, even at that age, I thought, wow, this is great. I would enjoy this. But I only had X amount of money to spend, and I had other things to buy. But even that little kick inside me said, I should be back here tomorrow. I should be back the next day. I should be back the next day. Well, I wasn't a club member, so I couldn't, but it was just that wonderful feeling of winning. And it is exhilarating. But we have to, I think, as a council and as a board here, help people to be able to get out of that zone. So I don't have a problem with us recommending that we do shut the facility down for 6 hours. I think it's a great idea. And I have no problem recommending that, as I think we did actually last time we were looking at casino items. Yes, Woodbine has 30 slots. It's had it for many years. But what we're looking at, not we, but what the council will be looking at, is expanding that. But at this board, we're not looking at that. We're looking at how this facility has health effects on people. And also talking about late hours, and someone mentioned that how will this affect local businesses. I'm sure there's not too many local businesses which are open during those 6 hours we're trying to close the casino. I honestly can't see it hurting business for 6 hours not having people at the casino. We also heard about busloads of ladies and gentlemen going down to Niagara. I have no problem with that. They're getting on a bus, and they know that they have to be back on that bus at a certain time to get themselves back to their home. So one, they're given a time limit, and two, they're not driving when they're tired. In this report, we hear that if you do extend hours and people can go home whenever they feel like, they're going home exhausted, which means we're going to have accidents. They've possibly been drinking too much, which means they're going to be pulled over for impaired driving. Impaired driving causes accidents. So I know I'm harping on this closed hours, and I know we've got people who have concerns about it, so I'm trying to help alleviate some of your concerns that it is a good idea. We have worked with OLG. They already do it. Doing it to one more facility, I don't think will be a big impact. And as to actually the financial aspect of it, I don't give two hoots to their financial aspect of it. I give many hoots to the health and welfare of the people who are gambling and the people who those gamblers meet on their way home. So I'm putting forward my motion to forward this with the recommendations to executive, which basically ends up the same thing. Everything gets to executive for their June 30th meeting. So that's the end of my 5 minutes, and I did my 5 minutes. Not bad. So first of all, we're going to do a vote on, the referral will come first, which is Councillor Carmichael Grebs, which is to refer it that means without the recommendations, directly to Executive Committee. So all those in favor? All those opposed? So that does not carry. Next will be my motion to forward this report to, how do we do this? Do we do my motion? No, we have to do so put the amendments forward. So my amendment, okay, so yes, my amendment first, that this report will be forwarded to executive to be considered at the time when they are looking at the expansion. So all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And now item as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. That carries also.
This will go to council when council.
Okay, moving right along, we are now on item 5, which is the 2015 Toronto Urban Health Fund allocation and review. And we held this because we have a speaker, Gary Thompson. Is Gary Thompson here? Welcome, Mr. Thompson. As you may know, you have 5 minutes, and I will try and sort of give you a wave to get you to wrap up, please.
Your staff report and vulnerable populations, including individuals at risk of acquiring HIV, whose misuse of illicit substances, and who are at risk of engaging in high-risk behaviors, face many barriers accessing preventable health services. These barriers include stigma, discrimination, language and literacy barriers, and distrust of government organizations. Toronto Public Health is teaching chest compressions for opiate overdose. I have received a letter from Dr. McEwen on the 21st. In the 3 years, it'll be 4 years this September since I took this training, there is no medical evidence they can supply public health, and I have looked through every critical care textbook, every medical database.
Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we need to actually have you speak to the report in front of us, not one of the organizations who teaches.
Okay? You would think it brutal to withhold the air from someone. The moment you begin discriminating against others, you create conditions that breed dissatisfaction and strife. I can save you a lot of money. There's all kinds of people showing up in the hospital, brain damage from lack of oxygen.
Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry, you're not speaking to the actual report we have in front of us, which is the organizations who did receive grant funding to continue doing the great work they are doing in our communities.
Yes, great work, and they could do a lot better because the taxpayer will have a lot more money to throw in. And please, Mr. McEwen, could I have a response to some medical literature that says chest compressions for a respiratory emergency?
I'm going to ask you to ask the doctor offline, but that's not before us today.
Yes, I've had 3 letters from the Board of Health, and they cannot supply it because it's the worst thing you could possibly do
Mr.
to
Thompson,
a respiratory emergency patient.
Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Have a good day. Any questions of staff on this report from anyone on the board? No questions? So therefore, we need a motion. Oh, I have a motion, sorry. I have a motion here that, if we could get it on the screen, please. The Board of Health requests the Medical Officer of Health to continue to identify opportunities and strategies to encourage applications across all 3 streams from organizations and projects that primarily serve First Nation, Métis, or Inuit groups, and improve outreach and opportunities to ensure representation from Aboriginal communities to the Toronto Urban Health Fund Review Panel. So this is to add to the item before us. Where am I? On my wrong pages here. Oh, sorry. So this is just to be added as an amendment to what we have before us. So I'm not going to speak to this because it's quite explanatory and it's also written in, part of it is part of our report. So I'm just going to ask for a, put my motion forward. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? And then we're also going to do item as adopt the item as amended. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. That passes. Let me just sign this. Okay, item 6, moving right along. We also have a speaker on item 6, 2014 Toronto Public Health Accountability Agreement Year-End Indicator Performance. I have here Kathleen Mary Richards. Is Kathleen here? Kathleen Mary here? No. Calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times. Okay, so on item 6, I just need a motion to receive. Who would like to put that forward? Councillor Cressy, your hand was first up. All those in favour? Anyone opposed? Excellent, that carries. Thank you very much. Our last item is the new item we put onto the agenda, which is working conditions in nail salons across the City of Toronto. This is item 11. The letter in front of us. Anyone have any questions of staff on this? It's on pink paper. It came to us at the beginning of the meeting. We've added it to the agenda. Anyone have any questions of staff? No? No anyone to speak on this item? Can I just call the question? All those in favor of the motion before us? Anyone opposed? That carries. Now, wow. Anyone have new business? I'm not going to ask that, am I? I just want to thank everyone. Everyone's been great. I hope now the new board members are beginning to get the swing of how we do things. This was a busy, busy agenda. I know it took me 4 hours to get through it on the weekend, but Sunday being raining was quite helpful in that respect. I would have been out gardening. And upon that, we adjourn. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Now you completed the business.
Yay! Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.